Good evening. Welcome to the Los Gatos Town Council meeting of May 3rd, 2016. Please turn your devices off or silence your devices if you haven't already done so. Before I ask the clerk to do the roll call, I will note for the record that Marcia Jensen is ill and unable to participate with us this evening. Madam Clerk.
Thank you and good evening. Councilmember Marcia Jensen. Councilmember Rob Rennie.
Here.
Councilmember Steve Leonardis.
Here.
Vice Mayor Mariko Sayak.
Here.
Mayor and Chair Barbara Spector.
Here. We will now be doing the pledge to the flag, and as those of you who are veterans of our meetings know, we have a outstanding student come up and lead us in the flag salute. This evening, that outstanding student is Lorenzo Fabella. Lorenzo, come on up. Around over here. So that you know why he has been selected to lead the flag salute, let me tell you a little bit about Lorenzo. Lorenzo is a stellar student, athlete, and human being. He is in the 8th grade at Hillbrook School. He hopes to study marine biology in high school and in college. He is a sportsman. He is a certified scuba diver. His favorite sport is football. His PAL football team went undefeated this year and won the championship last season. And this season, Lorenzo was captain and led his team in touchdowns. Additionally, with regard to community service, he has received the Silver Level President's Volunteer Service Award. And in spring break, he was in Nicaragua helping to build a school. So let's give a round of applause to this man. And if you'll rise and join us in the flag salute.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. If you'll go on down and introduce yourself to each of the council members. And another round of applause. I am now going to ask the Director of Parks and Public Works, Matt Morley, to come on forward. What Matt is, first of all, Matt is the Director of Parks and Public Works here in Los Gatos, and you directly or indirectly interface with Matt and his department constantly. If there's a drought, if there's a flood, if there is a fire, if there is not a fire, if trees are falling, if trees are being put up, Matt and his department are the ones who do all of that for our community. And so since 1960, there has been a National Public Works Week, and the theme this year is Always There. And obviously, Matt, his department, and everybody who works in the town of Los Gatos for Parks and Public Works is always there for us. So on behalf of the town and the council, I would like to give to Matt the proclamation proclaiming this week the National Parks and Public Works Week.
Did you want me to say thank you on the mic? Thank you very much.
At this point, we have our council and town manager reports, beginning with the council. Rennie.
Thank you, Mayor. As you recall, I was appointed as the board member from Los Gatos to the JPA for the Silicon Valley Community Choice Energy Agency. That agency appointed me to an ad hoc committee to help hire our interim CEO. And since our last council meeting, we spent an afternoon interviewing the three finalists for the CEO and then had a follow-up call after references were checked, and we have a preferred choice that we're bringing to our board. It's all closed session, so we can't say who it is yet, but that's what I've been working on. Thank you.
Thank you. Since our last meeting, and as mayor, I represented the town at the annual Santa Clara County annual art exhibition held at New. I also represented the town at the Children's Special Olympics event. We had another meeting hosted by the Silicon Valley Leadership Group having to do with the tax measure and widening Highway 17 and exploring other options beneficial to the town other than the widening of Highway 17. And Mr. Leonardis and I had a Finance Committee meeting where we have come up with proposals which we will be bringing forward to the council as a whole regarding the dealing with the town's unfunded liabilities. SIAC.
Thank you. Since our last meeting, Council Member Jensen and I participated in the Policy Committee. And on April 23, I also wanted to highlight that the interchanges at Highway 9 and Highway 17 are much cleaner. I hope everyone has noticed due to the efforts of several volunteers, and that we will be doing this monthly. So if anyone else would like to help volunteer clean up at the interchanges, please contact the town manager.
Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor. Since our last meeting, as was stated by the mayor, I attended the Finance Committee meeting.
Thank you. Manager matters.
Thank you. Good evening. I have 3 items for you tonight. First of all, I just wanted to point out we have new artwork here in the council chambers for your enjoyment. Second, speaking of artwork, our Veterans Foundation has narrowed the field in terms of 2 art designs for a potential memorial. Those are posted on the town's website, and we are open to public comment. So please fill out this short questionnaire. We really value the comments, and that the selection of the artwork will be before the council on June 21st. And third, Parks and Public Works, as was recently announced, it's Public Works Month. So we are celebrating our Public Works Department with an open house in the morning of May 18th, and the public is welcome to join us. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Privetti. We are now at consent items, which consist of agenda items 1 through 7. Those items will be acted upon in one motion unless someone from the council or someone from the community pulls an item from the consent calendar. I do have one item pulled, and that is agenda item 5, pulled by Angelia Dorner. That will be heard in its regular order. Does anyone from the council wish to pull an item other than item 5 from the consent calendar? Seeing no one, does anyone from the community? Seeing no one coming forward, I will now entertain a motion for the consent calendar. Mr. Leonardis?
Thank you, Mayor Spector. I move to approve the consent calendar, excluding item 5.
Second.
All right, I have a motion and a second. Discussion, hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Next, closed session report.
Yes. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Prior to tonight's regular session, Council met in closed session to discuss real property negotiations and pending litigation. The pending litigation was the litigation that the town has against BTA and Caltrans over Highway 85. As to both these matters, no action was taken. It requires reporting under the Brown Act.
Thank you. Ms. Dorner, if you'll please come forward to tell us why you are pulling the item from the consent calendar. You'll have 3 minutes. Well, why don't you just do your whole 3 minutes, the why and then the wherefore.
Hello? I think it is. Hi, I'm Angelia Dorner, a proud resident of the Almond Grove, and I just have some additional information that I think is critical for you, the council, to understand as it relates to this ADA requirement when we do street work. I agree, as listed in the staff report, that ADA law requires that ADA-compliant curb ramps be installed when we do any kind of street work, similar to the work that we've been doing, which is the rubber cape seal. And I did want to point out what the locations are. I would request that in the future, as was done in the last year, that the actual locations be included in the staff report, because the links to the PPW site will not be effective after a certain period of time. However, Town Terrace at both Avery and Rushmore will have new curb ramps, as well as 2 on Oka Road, and then there's 4 on Shannon and 1 at Hill and Old Boston Hill and Shore. When the street project first came about, I went ahead and tried to quantify how many curb ramps might be required based on the scope of the streets that we were considering under that project. At that point in time, without considering Shannon Road, Kennedy, or Blackberry Hill, since I didn't know where the work was really being done there, I counted 74. So 6 of those, the ones that were highlighted in green, Town Terrace and Oka Road, were in that 74. I just wanted to quantify for you that those other curb ramps will need to be done as well. It's an obligation of the town that since we did that street work, those curb ramps are required to be done as well. And if you use the current cost that was provided in the most recent bid, it's $4.2 thousand per, and that gets you $285,000. That does not include ancillary costs. If you reflect on the bid that was just received in this project, 55% of it actually relates to curb ramps. The other 45% relates to ancillary costs, which are sidewalks and other things to make those curb ramps conducive in areas where they're not currently conducive. I would like to agree that separate bids on the street work versus the curb ramps definitely make sense as far as getting competitive pricing. However, I think that quantification of the curb ramps is absolutely essential when you're considering the street project and look at those cost components in a combined basis. For example, Crossway was included in this year's street project. For about $7,000 worth of street work, we're required to do 4 curb ramps at Jansen and at Loma Alta. So $20,000 worth of curb ramps for $7,000 worth of street work. That may have been a better use to have incorporated that in when we're doing more street work around that particular area.
Thank you. Let's see if anyone has any questions for you. Seeing none? Oh, I do. Mr. Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. Ms. Dorner, judging by what you put up on the screen about the project up in the Blackberry Hill neighborhood, and judging by what we're seeing in front of us tonight, are you suggesting that there's some overlap? You said 6 or 7 ramps that are already have been incorporated into a previous bid that we approved?
Actually, no. What I'm saying is that the current project in front of you is only of 11 curb ramps. 7 of those are curb ramps that I didn't even include in my 74. So there's 74 plus those 7, plus however many other curb ramps are required on the areas of Shannon, probably not Blackberry Hill Road, Cypress, and Kennedy that already have curb ramps. You're required to do a new curb ramp in any area where there is a pedestrian walkway. So if there are sidewalks, the curb ramps, whether they were done a few years ago or not, if they're not under current compliance, they need to be redone. So any areas along Shannon, Kennedy, Blackberry doesn't have any sidewalks, and I know part of Cypress does. But anything that's required on those would be in addition to the quantification of the numbers that I had up here. It's a big number.
Leonard.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. So the question becomes, do you think we're spending our money wisely here this evening, or are we being redundant? Are we redoing something that was recently done, or what is the point being brought?
I actually think that the project is currently defined as absolutely critical. Town Terrace does not have any curb ramps right now. It's off the curb And it was actually included in the sidewalk and curb ramp project last year, but they weren't done. Curb ramps were done all kinds of other places that weren't in the scope. But what's in the current scope is definitely required and essential to be done. However, I wanted to apprise you of the fact that there is a significant number of other curb ramps that must be done in order for the town to be in compliance with this obligation.
One last question then. So based on your last statement, do you think that the town, a better approach might be to incorporate all those curb ramps that need to be done into one larger bid? Or are you in support of what is being proposed here tonight?
I was upset when Town Terrace didn't get their curb ramps last time around because they really need them. They've got strollers and elderly people, etc. However, the remainder of these, they need to be identified adequately, quantified, and put into a bid. And when it's time to do those, then it would definitely be more competitive to do them all. However, it is a big number, and the way that I think that you as council need to look at this is that because this is an obligation, as even the staff indicates in their staff report, by law, this is a new law that says, and it's quantifiable, then really same as your unfunded pension liability and should probably be included in your financial statement.
Thank you.
Mr. Rennie.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. So I'm trying to understand this also. And I'm trying to figure out the 74, and I'm assuming that the 74 comes from the current street projects that we have planned, and so that the curb ramps would have to be done with those, but we didn't include them in the current street projects. They'll then be in afterwards that we have to do. Is that what you're trying to tell me?
Yes, to give you an example. Slide before, the colored picture here is the roads up in the Oka Road area that are being done currently. Those roads were approved in January for the street project. So all of those intersections need to have ADA compliant curb ramps installed. However, this current project only includes 2 actually on Oka Road, not on all of those residential streets that are included in the street project. Does that help?
Other questions? Seeing none, thank you. The way I'm going to handle this removal from the consent calendar is I will ask staff to address the issues that have been raised. Then I will see if anyone else from the public would address this on this agenda item. Staff?
Thank you, Lisa Peterson, Town Engineer. Yes, regarding the issues that have been raised, we're very confident that the only ramps that need to be done are the ones that we have addressed. The way that ADA reads is you need to include the curb ramps in locations where you have sidewalks, and you not necessarily have to include them in every location throughout all of the streets that are currently being done for the Rubber Cape Seal project. So for example, you have streets up in the hills, they don't necessarily have sidewalks. You don't need to do the ADA ramps in those locations because, there's no sidewalks and there's no active path of travel in those locations. So we have looked over this project several times. We feel very comfortable that these are the ramps that we need to do with this particular project. Certainly when other projects come up in the future and we have additional streets that are included in that, we would need to do that. There may be some confusion on what is currently in the Rubber Cape Seal project for this year.
Staff? Ms. Sayak?
I'm also trying to understand this as well. So I'm going to, I'm going to share with you how I think I understand this process, and then please correct me if there's any errors there. We approved earlier all the streets that needed to be repaired, and then based on those streets, then someone within staff or the contractors looks at which ramps need repair based on ADA requirements, And so that's why we can't bring them forward in parallel, because we have to approve the streets first, and then we look at the curb ramps? We could bring them in parallel. However, it ends up costing us less money if we don't. And the reason is, if you include them in the annual street maintenance project, what happens is the contractor that does that project is not a concrete contractor. So he will hire on a sub, and then he'll add a profit onto that sub's work. So it ends up being more cost-effective for us to take it and bid it separately. Okay, so I hear the concern raised, and then I hear staff response. What if there are more curb ramps that need further repair, and this is already approved? How do we address those additional curb ramps? So we are actually going to be putting out a bigger project that is going to address sidewalk, curb and gutter needs throughout the town in the fall, and we will have additional curb ramps in there that aren't necessarily on our project this year, but just curb ramps that need to get done. So if there happened to be something, we can certainly add it to that. Okay, so just so I understand again, annually we see streets, and then we see curb ramps, and then we see sidewalks, and continually these get updated based on the needs that are assessed on that year. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And so if there are any that we don't identify with this go-around, it would fall to the next go-around?
That's correct.
Okay, thanks.
The questions? Seeing none, this is a public hearing, and it has been pulled from the consent calendar. So does anyone else in the community or in the audience want to address this on the agenda item 5, curb ramps? Seeing no one coming forward, I will close the public testimony portion of this hearing and look to the council for questions, comments, motion. We have Ms. Syak.
So, Ms. Peterson, when there are specific either commercial or residential projects that come forward, they pay into this if any of the construction touches and needs repair, correct? Typically with those projects, we would ask them to include those in the project and pay for those with the project. So those occur while the project is under construction. We don't necessarily save those up for when.
Correct. We make that the responsibility of the development.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Leonardis.
I was going to move forward with the motion to approve item 5 on the consent calendar.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Leonardis, seconded by Mr. Rennie, to approve consent calendar item 5. Discussion. Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you. All right, we are now on verbal communications. This is the opportunity for anyone in the audience to address the council for 3 minutes on any item that is not on our agenda. I do have cards from people who want to address us under verbal communications, and the first one is Scott Kaplaner.
Scott Kaplaner, my wife Linda. We live at 243 Jones Road. We also have another property down on University. We're here this evening to ask about Chapter 4, the town codes, which is going to be getting looked at. Really wanted to kind of bring up the ambiguity we found as we brought a chicken coop onto our property recently. And it dealt with kind of setbacks and how many birds, or in this case chickens, can we have per lot or parcel, and really seeking clarity around that. And then also wondering aloud if there's any plans for some citizen involvement when the town looks at the code, regulations of this. Want to up there. We did a little research into neighboring communities, what they have. It seems like there's not a one-size-fits-all formula, so
You do have a little bit more time. Is there anything else you wanted to add verbally?
Aren't expressly forbidden, but they defer to the noise ordinance on that, and I think that's kind of what we do here in town as well. In Monte Sereno, it's 1 hen for every 3,000 square feet. I have almost 20,000 square feet, so it might be 7. So we kind of think that a one-size-fits-all isn't really appropriate for something like this. You certainly wouldn't want 4 hens on a 4,000 square foot lot, but you might be able to do 10 on a quarter acre or on a half acre. So we're hoping that they use a little bit of sanity in the way this gets refreshed in the upcoming months.
Thank you. Before you leave, Mr. Schultz wants to respond.
You look like you were looking for someone to respond. It is on my work plan to update that chapter. More importantly than even this issue is the dangerous dogs issue that needs to be updated. It's sorely lacking a number of administrative hearings that are needed under state law. So at the same time we're looking at the dangerous dog issues in Chapter 4, we'll be looking at this issue in the next 4 to 6 months, and we'll reach out and meet with anyone besides the speakers on the issues, and then bring it forward probably to the policy committee first, if that's necessary, to council. It would not go to planning commission because it's not within the zoning code.
Is it an ordinance or?
Yes, it's in Chapter 4 is our ordinance that deals with animals.
All right. And can we give the names and contact information for these speakers?
Yes, I believe we already have them.
All right. Very good. Thank you both for, we have a question. Mr. Leonardis.
Well, just a question for staff. It sounds like, or maybe the Mr. Kaplinger and his wife, you wanted to kind of a modernization of what we have. Is that correct? Our laws are old and maybe outmoded. And somebody brought forth to me a concern recently about our bee ordinance. I think bees are illegal in Los Gatos, but a lot of people have hives. So maybe that can be included as well, because I think that's another one that might be outmoded or outdated based on what people are, how their lifestyles are being lived today. So thank you for bringing.
Actually, somebody did reach out to me on Nextdoor today and commented saying that they were having trouble with their hives. They weren't allowed to use those.
So thank you for bringing this forward.
Other questions for the speakers? All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank you, Mr. Schultz. I have one more card for verbal communications. Angelia Dorner.
Angelia Dorner again, and I'm still a proud resident of the Almond Grove. Back in January, you might recall where you defined a new underground utility district to be on Los Gatos Boulevard from Lark to Churco. And that was in an attempt to get the process rolling on utilizing our Rule 20A credits that have been built up with PG&E. It's very expensive to underground utilities, and one of the primary considerations in establishing how to use those credits is that it provides the most benefit or benefit to the most residents, whether it be public safety, health, or obviously services, because everybody in the community has actually pitched in to build up those credits through their PG&E bills. So I just wanted to add a little bit of clarification about this Northern California Joint Pole Association, because I view this conduit project, the conduit feature in the Almond Grove project to be. Members in the Northern California Pole Association by right have access to use the existing pole infrastructure in providing all current and future services that they have to offer. Non-members negotiate and pay a fee to the association in order for them to be able to utilize those same poles. I wanted to tell you who the members are. It's very difficult to get the names, but I do have a tabulation of the kinds of companies. And I just want you to think about these companies for a moment. We've got 17 municipalities and water districts, 17 communications companies, 6 wireless communication companies, distributed antenna companies, and 2 power utilities. We can all guess who those are, at least the last 2. But what I'm trying to get you to think about a little bit more is that when fiber optics are going to be brought into town, they're currently being installed on the poles in San Jose by a company. We got an encroachment permit. In fact, Matt referred to another encroachment permit recently from a company called Crown Castle, who happens to be the largest in the world wireless infrastructure provider. On this Almond Grove project, please just think about the process that's going to be required to put that in. Remove the old concrete, dig out a bunch of dirt, then dig another trench at least 7 to 8 inches down so that you can put in a PVC pipe the entire length of the street. Cover it all back up, tap it down, and pour your new concrete. You can make a change order. The easiest change order in the world is just get rid of step number 3. And the immediate savings that will not be spent, dollars that are going to be spent this summer of $154,000 to put that conduit in, can be saved and stay in the kitty for the rest of the project and hopefully then released into other CIP projects.
Thank you. Questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. I have no other cards for anyone wanting to address us on verbal communications. So I will close that portion of our meeting and go to public hearings. Our first public hearing is Agenda Item 8, an interim urgency ordinance relating to water conservation. I will turn to staff for the staff report.
Thank you, Mayor. Matt Morley, Director of Parks and Public Works. In spite of a nice winter of significant amount of rainfall, we still have a water shortage, and we are still in a drought. In looking into the next year, the Water District has asked local residents to continue to conserve. Last year in June, the council adopted an urgency or extended the urgency ordinance that would take us through about this time this year, a 12-month period. And that urgency ordinance is about to lapse. The Water District recently heard an item on their agenda to talk towards reducing the limits or the restrictions on watering associated with the drought, and they opted to retain their current levels of conservation. So with that, the town staff is recommending that we also continue our levels of conservation and our limitations as were set forth in the urgency ordinance. The extension is for another year's period, and that would take us hopefully through another winter season where we get lots of rain as we had this year, and able to look back on this drought as something that happened in the past. The ordinance allows us to be flexible, so it allows us to enforce the restrictions or the requirements that are set forth before us by the state or by other agencies such as San Jose Water or the Water District. Should those restrictions be lightened up in the future so that we don't have the need to do the enforcement, we can still align through our ordinance with the lightened restrictions. So with that, that's our staff report, and of course we're here for questions.
We have questions of staff. Mr. Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. Mr. Morley, I know that there are certain guidelines that the public is familiar with, but maybe you could remind us, such as the watering times and not letting the water run and water the sidewalk and run into the street, and do not water in a rainstorm and things like that. And I notice on occasion, maybe that perhaps on some of our commercial properties on Los Gatos Boulevard, which is a road I drive on all the time, there may be some disconnect between perhaps the property owners, the gardeners who run the sprinklers for the property owners, and the tenants in the building who appreciate their green lawns. So can you remind us of all those rules this evening?
I certainly can. You hit a large number of them. Congratulations. Great memory on those. There's a year ago that we talked about them. And you hit a good number of them. I think the watering of the lawns is the most significant. The Water District has asked for a 30% reduction and continues to retain that reduction. The town has set ours at 25%, and we would ask residents to continue to look to conserve at that level. The watering of the lawns, the best time for that, watering of landscape is early in the morning, and so to the extent that residents can do that, that's great, and that would help to conserve water as well. What we do find is that one of the downfalls of watering early in the morning is that when things get out of whack and irrigation systems aren't working quite the way that they should, they go unnoticed for a day or two. So we encourage folks to report that in so that the outreach can be done. The Water District on their website has a report out function. You can link to that from the Los Gatos webpage as well, from the homepage, and be able to report that information to the Water District. Of course, there's other simple things that the residents can do, such as making sure that their hoses have a hose end sprayer on them versus running the water free out of the hose, and ensuring that the toilets and the faucets are low-flow toilets and faucets, so that we can continue to conserve. Hopefully, we'll get the groundwater recharged over the next winter and be back to a normal situation. But as you know, and if you've been following the news, the reports of La Nina coming up in the next winter could change that for us. So best to be safe at this point and continue our conservation efforts.
Thank you. Other questions? Seeing none. I have no cards on this agenda item. Seeing no one coming forward, I will close the public testimony portion of this hearing and look to council for motion, comments, questions, agenda item 8. Mr. Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. I'd like to move forward with the staff recommendation to continue the urgency ordinance 2239 as found in attachment 2 through May 4th of 2017, and emphasize that the drought is still with us. I haven't washed my car in over a year. It's black, and Mother Nature washed it this winter for me. Thank you. I would like to also remind those to water your when you need to water before 5 a.m. and don't water in the rainstorms. And there are supposedly people out there who could fine you for this, although I'm not sure how many fines have been written. But please do what you can to continue on the good work that the citizens of Los Gatos have been doing, and recognize that the drought is still with us, and continue to conserve water.
I'm going to second Mr. Leonardis' motion and his comments and add the don't let the water run out on the sidewalk and down the gutters. That's another thing I see. Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Ms. Jensen absent. All right, agenda item 9. This is to adopt an ordinance of the Town Council of the Town of Los Gatos amending Section 186010 to include restrictions on smoking in commercial zoned areas and multi-unit residences and other miscellaneous edits. Do we have a staff report, Mr.
Yes.
Schultz?
Good
Now,
evening.
let me, before we get to that, I understand that you and members of the Youth Commission are going to be making the presentation?
I do not see my youth commission here, so I'm going to ad-lib their part of it unless they show up in a minute or two. So
All right.
I'm going to move forward.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. One of your 2015-2016 strategic goals and priorities is to update the town's smoking regulations, which was last revised 25 years ago. Since September 2015, the Town Attorney's Office has been working with the Youth Commission on proposed amendments to the smoking regulations. The proposed amendments to the smoking regulations come in the context of greater scientific understanding of the dangers of secondhand and third-hand smoking. The proposed amendments to the smoking regulations include provisions for prohibiting smoking in all public areas, including the commercial areas, and multiple unit residents also. Staff and the Youth Commission relied on several sources in making their recommendations for the proposed changes to our smoking ordinance, including other cities and towns regulations, the Public Health Law and Policies Technical Assistance and Legal Center, the American Lung Association Center for Tobacco Policy, and the County of Santa Clara's Tobacco Control Program was also instrumental in providing us with revisions and input on our amendments. All of the proposed prohibitions on smoking are listed in 1860-010. It goes much farther than as the requirements under state law. It will prohibit any smoking in private residences that are used as licensed child care and health care facilities. The state law says that you can only smoke when the children are present in the homes, but if you're a licensed child care provider now, there will be no smoking at any time because of the third-hand smoking issues that we now know about. It won't be allowed in buses, taxi cabs, or rideshare vehicles such as Uber or Lyft, so it'll take in the new technology that's come about. There will be no in truck cabs or any type of vehicles that are even private vehicles, as long as they are used by employees. Hotel lobbies and rooms will be 100% smoke-free. State law provides that you can allow for 30%. We did tremendous outreach to all the hotels, and I was actually surprised. They are right now completely 100% smoke-free to begin with, so that won't be a problem with any of our hotels. I think now they'll be able to say when people do complain, they'll say it's a town law instead of saying it's their own law, so we'll take the heat. All restrooms, warehouse facilities, places of employment, the state law allows for exemptions if you have less than 5 employees. That won't be allowed anymore. All places of employment will not allow smoking anymore. There's also in the outdoor areas, all outdoor dining and indoor dining obviously was already prohibited, but now all outdoor dining. Entryways, there will be no smoking within 30 feet of all buildings. The current laws, it's only from public facilities owned by the town by state law, and it's 25 feet. We've extended that 5 more feet, and it's from entryways of any buildings that the public is at. All public events, we've listed that out, that there'll be no smoking at any of our public events and any of our public properties, any trails. It will also not be allowed. Sports fields and parks. As comprehensive, it even extends to all of our commercial areas, not just the downtown area, but all of our commercial areas. So it's a very extensive ordinance in that, many towns and cities maybe used a myriad of some and not all, but the Youth Commission wanted to go for a complete, if you want to call it a home run, they wanted to include everything possible in this ordinance. So it's quite comprehensive as far as limiting smoking because of the secondhand smoke and the third-hand smoke. In regards to multiple housing units, it also prohibits smoking inside the unit and in the common area, which is also been adopted by the county and other jurisdictions in the area. Multi-unit residence is more than 4. So anytime there's more than 4, then they would have to be in compliance with this, and there's certain requirements. They have to write it into the lease, the landlord. There is an exception, though, for multi-unit residents and for hotels even, that allows them to set up an area in the common area or in the hotel area outside. But that also has to be within a confined area, and it has to be approved by the town. So there is a process that they'd have to go through if they wanted to be exempt from that. And that exemption actually could apply to other businesses too, if they wanted to set up a smoking area. And with that, that's kind of the conclusion. It is a very comprehensive ordinance. As I mentioned, the Youth Commission did look very extensively at a number of towns and cities that had numerous different requirements. This is probably one of the most comprehensive that I've seen, in that it tackles not just, some tackle the housing but don't tackle the commercial. Some tackle the commercial but didn't touch the housing. But most did that first list I read off about the parks and dining areas, for almost all of them across the board, as prohibiting smoking. So with that, I'll open it up. They did do a survey. They were going to bring those results. I'll maybe try to get that at the next meeting for you, but they did do an extensive survey, and I believe it was somewhere in the percentage of 70% were in favor of prohibiting smoking as much as possible. And they did reach out to the owners of multifamily units, and they were all in support of this. It was difficult for them to reach out to tenants. I actually did some surveying with some of the bars, since they couldn't go into the bars, and of course I can. And most of them were also very supportive of the non-smoking outside their establishments. So across the board, I didn't get any really absolutely hard, fast, don't do that.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. I had some questions before I go to the remainder of the council. You're talking about, in multifamily, you're talking about rental units?
Correct. Only rental units.
Okay. And I think you said that, I think the ordinance refers to having to, if it's not in the lease, it has to get into the lease within 12 months?
Correct.
What if the lease, the lease exists right now and it's a 4-year lease? how does it get folded into a multi-year lease like that?
In that case, it would have to wait till it end. I think we assume that most leases are no more than a year, but if they were a rental agreement for an apartment that was 4 years, we wouldn't require that landlord to amend it until that lease was up.
Okay, and then you have smoking prohibited in commercial legal smoking areas like smoking lounges. How could smoking be prohibited in a commercial area that is, in fact, a smoking area?
Sure, I quite understand.
Well, you have, for example, you have smoking lounges, no smoking.
The cigar place.
Okay, let's use that one. How can you do that if the commercial area itself is a smoking area?
They would be able to apply for that exemption and show how they were going to be able to be differentiated and apart from, if it was outside, being apart from any of the other area, or they'd have to show that inside they would have that separate ventilation system from all the other, if they are a joint tenant.
Thank you very much. Other questions? Mr. Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. Mr. Schultz, every year when we get a D on our smoking report card, the one thing they seem to call us out for is not requiring a cigarette seller's permit. And I think some of the neighboring jurisdictions like Saratoga and perhaps Campbell have recently adopted this. Is that not being adopted or not being proposed by the Youth Commission and staff at this time?
It'll come back as a separate one. I wanted to get this done for the Youth Commission because they spent their entire time on that. That's just some minor tweaks and changes we can bring, and we can bring that back to you certainly within the next 2 or 3 months. I wanted to bring that with you at the same time as to potentially raising the age of buying cigarettes to 21. But right now, that's a real legal issue between the towns and the tobacco companies, and I didn't want to put us in that middle of that litigation. It's on the governor's desk. I don't know if signed it to raise it to 21 anyways, and if the governor does it, then certainly we can easily put it in our ordinance. But I didn't want to bring it at this time and end up somehow getting legal challenge to it. So in the next 2 or 3 months, it'll come back to you.
Mr. Leonardis.
One more, thank you. So the other question I have is, when does this take effect? Is it a 12-month, assuming the council adopts this ordinance this evening, is it a 12-month, is it a 6-month, is it, when do all these rules come into play?
So by law, it's 30 days from the date. But I kind of see this a little bit like if you want to compare it to the leaf blower. There's going to be quite a bit of education. We're going to have to put up signs. We're going to have to, a lot of this law, and I've dealt with it in many other towns and cities, is almost like a self-regulated. Once the signs are up, hopefully people will, for those that violate it, are told, this is a smoke-free area or this is non-smoking area, and you slowly see people comply with it. So we're trying to get voluntary compliance. We're not going to be out there, police or code enforcement, writing tickets in 30 days, especially since it might be longer than that before we even get up some signs in the downtown area. Is primarily where we'll focus most of the enforcement.
Thank you.
Further questions? Ms. Sayak.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. First question, you mentioned the bill that's on the governor's desk. My understanding is Santa Clara County, though, has passed, so that smoking is over 21, but those only apply to unincorporated county areas?
Correct. And there's a few other cities that have also passed that 21. But the question is whether they can circumvent state law to make it more stricter and who has the authority to do that. So that's why I wanted to wait to see how that issue flushes out in court or with the governor signing the bill.
Do you happen to know within the bill that's on his desk, is there something that specifically says we wouldn't be able to make ours more stringent? Or
in the current law, the issue is you can't make it more stringent. If the state law changes to 21, certainly we could.
Okay. And the second question I had...
in fact, we would have to.
Okay. The Youth Commission, I know, spent a lot of time on this, so I'm kind of bummed they're not here. Do you know what they were intending to present so that we can make sure we understand their concerns and or comments before?
Sure, and I met with them yesterday, so that's why I'm a little surprised, but maybe, finals and who knows, other things that they have going on. But they were going to present the hotels, the secondhand, the multi-residential, and the exceptions were the two things in the surveys that they had done. So incorporate that into the next meeting for a quick report on the 17th. If it meets the first reading, then they could certainly do that. Pull it real quick and let them do a quick presentation. It was important. I mean, I was just amazed at the commitment, the understanding of these issues, the debate that they had at each and every monthly meeting to go through this, and the evolution of whether you wanted something or didn't want something on in this ordinance. So they certainly did do their homework, and it was a great process for me to go through.
All right, see no further questions. I do have cards. If anyone wants to address us on this agenda item 9, please submit a speaker card. First one is Carol Baker. Ms. Baker, you'll have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening. I am Carol Baker. I am a volunteer representative of the American Cancer Society Cancer Action Network. But more importantly, I am representing myself as a former addict of tobacco smoke. I started smoking when I was 15, and I was fully addicted by the age of 18. I never once had any trouble buying cigarettes. So I hope that you will move forward with your 21-year, so that they can't buy them until after they're 21 years old. You don't have that much sense before you're 21 years old, and you don't have that much knowledge about what the cigarettes can do to you. And you don't believe at that age that they can cause you that much harm. I am very excited about the ordinances that you're proposing, or the amendments to the ordinances that you're proposing, because they are wonderful ones, the ones to protect your citizens and your visitors. I think that's outstanding. I'm a little concerned because I've heard there's some problem with the multi-unit housing ones, that there are certain people, probably those who can afford to buy the expensive condos, that will not be affected by it. Is this true? That's my question for you.
If you could just direct your comments
I'm
towards
sorry?
us. All right.
I'm sorry. And so that would be my question. If I can get an answer to that, I'd appreciate it. But I am encouraging you to follow through with these amendments, and thank you for considering them, and hopefully take the next steps forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, Dr. Roger Kennedy.
Thank you, Mayor Spector and members of the council. I'm Dr. Roger Kennedy, co-chair of the Tobacco Free Coalition of Santa Clara County and a 38-year resident of Gatos. I really want to congratulate the council for looking at this very bold initiative, which will be a great benefit to protecting the citizens of Los Gatos from secondhand smoke. I'm very pleased to hear that some of the other important issues are not been left behind, but are being held in abeyance, in particular the tobacco retail license and the raising the age to 21. These are critically important issues because it is the youth of our community that are being attacked by the tobacco industry. They need to replace all these smokers who die, and they need to get 2 kids for every smoker who dies. If we can delay their onset of smoking until they're 21, number one, they will be much less likely to become addicted, and if they do get addicted, they will stop. 16-year-olds don't have too many 21-year-olds to purchase cigarettes for them because they don't have their friends are not 21. An 17-year-old has an 18-year-old friend. So I would also add that we need smoke-free housing in every multifamily unit, in every multi-unit housing, because just because I own a nice fancy house or a nice fancy condominium, I'm not allowed to burn tires in my backyard. No one should be allowed to pollute a building with cigarette smoke. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker, Barbara Broderick. And you can correct that last name if I got it wrong.
You got it. You got it right. I go by Bonnie, but good evening, Mayor and members of the Town Council. My name is, again, Bonnie Broderick, and I have lived in Los Gatos for 25 years and raised my 3 children here in this town. I am also the director of the Center for Chronic Disease and Injury Prevention at the Santa Clara County Public Health Department.
I'm just here tonight to commend the Youth Commission for their fabulous work in preparing and bringing forth their recommendations related to tobacco-free communities. I had a chance to attend the Youth Commission and watch them in action, listen to the debates, listen to the discussions, and I was really encouraged and heartened to see that the youth in this community have taken on this issue, and I really appreciated their thoughtfulness and work on this. So I want to say thank you for allowing the youth to take leadership. That was wonderful. We really appreciate that and think youth are the future. So again, to be really brief, the recommended ordinance you have before you really do protect the health and safety of the residents, the visitors, and workers in this town, and that's a wonderful step for Los Gatos. Tobacco is still the #1 health issue, or preventable health issue in this country, and there's a lot more that we can do. I was encouraged to hear that there's additional work that the Youth Commission has done that will be brought forward, and that's wonderful news. Nicole Cox, the Tobacco Prevention Program Manager, and I are here if we can be any further assistance in providing data, evidence-based practice, share what the county has already done and what others in the communities around us have done. We'd be happy to do that. So thank you, and kudos to the youth for taking this on.
Thank you. Next speaker, David Wiseman.
Dave Weissman. I start off by complimenting the Youth Commission and the town attorney for a draft well done. I hope that you pass this ordinance tonight. I do have one suggestion to the motion maker, that you require that the council revisit this ordinance in 1 year to see how it is working. I would be especially interested to see if those multi-unit resident buildings that are primarily owner-occupied and thus not covered under this ordinance are satisfied with the status quo. Santa Clara County and Sunnyvale already cover all multi-unit housing units, even those units that are privately owned. On the other hand, you could decide tonight to strengthen our proposed ordinance to include all such multi-unit housing. As the draft now stands, those residents able to afford their own attached units are treated differently than those residents who rent. This should only be a health issue, not an economic issue. And the Youth Commission supported this aspect unanimously. Some council members may think that the provisions in this draft are too extreme. I totally disagree. Which takes me back to 1991 when the town passed its first non-smoking ordinance. The restaurant and bar owners screamed economic ruin. Big Tobacco threatened to sue. Health professionals were called nicotine Nazis. We now know that after our ordinance was passed, people came to Los Gatos for the smoke-free environment. Big Tobacco was too busy fighting with Sacramento to worry about the little fish that Los Gatos represented. But the science has changed considerably since 1991. People should be able to live in and visit Los Gatos and not be exposed to any known carcinogens. To do less is irresponsible. Plus, as a town, we have been encouraging restaurants to expand their outdoor eating areas. Now we have to protect those outdoor diners from undesired secondhand smoke as someone slowly walks by them on the sidewalk. But as good as this draft is, there is still one major missing piece of the solution to this epidemic of preventable diseases. I believe that raising the age to buy tobacco to 21 years old is critically important and was also unanimously supported by the Youth Commission. There is no reason to delay this for another day, and staff should be instructed to return to the council in the immediate near future with this provision.
Thank you. Questions? See none. Thank you, sir. I have one more card. Rosemary, and I can't read the last name, but you live on Blossom Hill Street. If you'll wait until you get to the microphone. There you go.
Okay, Rosemary Murtha. I live in Los Gatos on Blossom Hill Road. I just wanted to hope that you pass this. I am a victim of it. I lived in an apartment building for 10 years, and my neighbors smoke. And no matter how much I've been trying to get help from the managers, I get none. And so basically, if something like this passes, then I no longer have to constantly breathe this in. So anyway, I just would hope that you would pass this. Thank you.
Thank you. I have no further cards. Seeing no one coming forward, I will close the public testimony portion of this hearing and turn to the council for questions, comments, motion. This is agenda item 9. Mr. Schultz.
I just want to make a clarification because I said the multi-unit had to be more than 4 units. It's only 2 units. And so anything more, it only would apply if you had 1 unit for rent would be excluded from this. So 2 or more multi-family units would be required under this. So it's not the 4 I mentioned earlier, 2. But it would not apply to those if you owned a condo and you rented your condo out. It does not apply to that. Be it it's a private residence. Where do you stop? Do you start at condos or do you move on to family homes? There seemed to be not a stop there, and with the property rights, they weren't willing to go there, and they felt that also condominiums can be regulated through their own CC&Rs if they need be. So that's why they didn't go there, but certainly there have been some counties that have extended this to condominiums, and even if it's only 1.
Thank you. Ms. Sayak.
Mr. Schultz, so I'm trying to understand the differences between what is within ours and what Santa Clara County passed. So for multifamily units, what is their rule on owner-occupied versus rental, if you happen to know?
I believe it extends all the way down to even a single condo. If you rent out a single condo that you own, it would extend also to the same provisions of not being able to smoke within the if you rent it out. I believe it extends all the way that far. Ours requires a multi-unit to be more than 2. So if you own 2 condos and we're renting out 2 condos, I believe then we could interpret it that way. But I'm certainly willing to bring it back in a year and see where we were at with this issue.
Well, Ms. Sayak is writing. I would just ask, as we do our questions and our discussion and our motion, Mr. Schultz, if you could just take a look at where we talk about, the ordinance talks about how the condominium rental ownership number of units, where that is, so we can look at it.
So condominiums is not addressed at all. What we address at the bottom of page 7 is multi-unit residences, which is a rental complex that contains 2 or more units. That's where it applies. So I don't believe it would apply at all to a condominium complex the way we currently have it written. We didn't do any outreach to condominium residential units and to owners whatsoever in the survey or through the Youth Commission either.
But wouldn't your provision encompass rental condominiums, or am I missing something here?
No, we didn't put in the definition of a condominium private ownership that rents out whatsoever. This was a multi-family unit residential, which would be 2 or more units. To me means it's your multifamily that's strictly rental. It would not be private ownership. It would not cover that. We'd have to put in a definition for condominium, and we took that out specifically with the Youth Commission.
All right, and bear with me until I get it into my head. A person or a corporation, a company, owns a apartment complex, and they rent that out, and it's covered.
Yes.
A person or a company owns a condominium building, and they rent it out. But you're making a distinction
Yes, I am.
because of the name condominium
Yes.
versus...
As accused of multifamily.
All right. Further questions? Ms. Sayak.
And we certainly could add that situation in where a condominium complex is owned by the same owner that owns more than 2 units within. But the Youth Commission didn't want to go as far as if you have a condominium complex with, let's just pick a number, 10 units, and 8 of those units are being owned by different people, and the other 2 are being owned but rented out. They would not be included in this definition.
And
Ms. Sayak.
so I just wanted to clarify that multi-unit versus condominium being its owner owned versus multifamily is strictly for rent.
Correct.
And there was specific discussion of the two types. And it was, at this time, the Youth Commission decided not to be as aggressive for condominiums.
Correct. There'd be quite a lot more outreach we would have to do to make certain those issues were addressed.
Okay. But a follow-up, but again, in Santa Clara County, they went aggressive and chose to go
I believe
owner-occupied
that's what the
as well.
testimony was.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions? Mr. Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. Mr. Schultz, since several speakers addressed the 21 age limit, can you restate or kind of rationalize what the thinking is about not incorporating that into the
So
current
it's a
proposal?
separate section, and the two sections that after this would apply to it, the retail tobacco licensing. So we just did the smoking regulations where it's prohibited as opposed to how you buy and sell it and the age. So it's a different section. So I wanted to bring this section first and see. And also the reason why, I've got a draft done. It could be brought sooner rather than later, but I also, they are threatening, the tobacco industry has threatened every single city and county that has passed the 21 at this time. And I really didn't want to see us being brought into litigation if, in fact, with a couple more months on this issue, it was signed into law by the governor. If the governor vetoes it, then I can bring you back what the ramifications are now and what are the downsides if, in fact, you pass the 21 and whether that would be open us up to litigation. So I just wanted to wait a couple more months and let that issue play out at the state level before we made a decision to raise it. But if council wants to, I can bring that back ASAP.
Mr. Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. So in your opinion, would it be a good time to bring it back when we bring back the notion of the cigarette seller's permit?
Yes, both of those will come at the same time.
Thank you.
Questions, discussion, motion? Mr. Leonardis.
Well, thank you, Mayor Spector. I was going to move that we go with the staff recommendations as brought forth in our report and adopt the ordinance and introduce the reading of the ordinance by title only.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? Ms. Sayak.
I'd like to second, but before seconding, may I ask the maker of the motion if he'd be willing to entertain an amendment or some?
Why don't you just say what,
Okay.
if you were to second it,
If
what
I were to
amendment?
second it, since it is first reading, I just want to make sure that we make sure the youth commissioners are present. There was a lot of compliments, and while they can hear it via web stream, I'd like to make sure that all their hard work is heaped upon them personally. But I would also like, in the motion, specific instruction that the tobacco retail licensing and over 21 smokers come back subsequent, no later than a year after we've approved this.
Is that acceptable to the maker of the motion?
It is acceptable. I would like to see it come back in less than a year, if possible.
6 months would be fine.
All right, so you'd like to have those two items come back in 6 months?
If that would be enough time, yes.
All right, Ms. Sayak?
Then I will second the motion.
All right, motion and a second. Discussion. Mr. Rennie.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. There was a suggestion that we also include in the motion to revisit in a year how this is working out with the multi-units. In other words, staff would come back with some kind of report on how that was going. That seemed like a reasonable suggestion. Would the maker of the motion be interested in that?
All right, we have discussion. Does Mr. Leonardis, you want to add on in anything?
I think that would be fine to give this a check in a year and possibly incorporate, of course, more stringent regulations pertaining to the condominiums and the private ownership. We'll see how that goes. But yes, I would be amenable to that.
All right, so the maker of the motion is amenable to having a 1-year review to see if the ordinance will incorporate multi-unit owned residences. Seconder?
That's fine with me.
All right, further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Schultz, and thank you, Youth Commission. Oh, we need a reading. Madam Clerk.
Excuse me, an ordinance of the Town Council of the Town of Los Gatos amending Section 18.60.010 to include restrictions on smoking in commercial zoned areas and in multi-unit residences and other miscellaneous edits.
Anything further? Is that it, Mr. Schultz, just the title? All right, so we are now on agenda item 10. This is a subdivision application, an architecture and site application for property located at 15975 Union Avenue. This is an appeal. The appellant, I was going to go with the staff report first. Is that right? Okay. Let's have our staff report first. Thank you.
Yes. Erin Walters, Associate Planner. Good evening, Mayor and Council members. The subject, R110 zone property, is located on the northwestern corner of Union Avenue and Blossom Hill Road. The existing site contains a single-story, single-family home with access off of Union Avenue. The applicant proposes to demolish the existing single-family home, subdivide the lot into 3 lots, and with access from a shared driveway off of Union Avenue. The applicant proposes to build 3 homes with access from a shared driveway off of Union. The proposed development requires public improvements and a right-of-way dedication along Union Avenue and Blossom Hill Road. The required improvements include a curb, gutter, sidewalk, dedicated right-hand turn lane, crosswalk, and bike lane. The proposed development, on March 9th, the Planning Commission denied the applications because they made 3 of the 7 possible findings for denial of the subdivision pursuant to the Subdivision Map Act. That is letter B, that the design and improvement of the proposed subdivision is not consistent with all the elements of the general plan. C, that the site is not physically suitable for the proposed development. And D, that the site is not physically suitable for the proposed density of the development. Attachment 7 contains the verbatim minutes and facts that the Planning Commission put into record to support the findings. The decision of the Planning Commission was appealed on March 16th. The appeal states that the Planning Commission erred in its decision because their interpretations of items B, C, and D of the findings required by the Subdivision Mapped Act, Section 66474, were subjective, arbitrary, or inconsistent with the facts. The appellant provides a letter providing justifications for the appeal, and that is in Attachment 9. Tonight, you have received a desk item, which includes 2 public comments and answers to a council member's questions. This concludes staff's report. Planning staff as well as public works staff is available for questions.
Thank you. Can you give me the square footage of each of the homes? Before that, do the homes have basements and or cellars?
The homes do not have basements or cellars. They're all 3 of them are 2 stories. And I can give you the square footage for each. Lot 1 is 3,368 square feet with a 760 square foot garage. Lot 2 is a residence of 3,338 square feet with a 737 square foot garage. Lot 3 has also a home with 3,338 square feet and also a 737 square foot garage.
Thank you. Other questions of staff? Mr. Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. Ms. Walters, will there be any potential restriping of Blossom Hill Road? I know that they are going to be adding or taking a part of the existing property and making the roadway wider and making it wider all the way around the corner potentially, which I think will help enhance that intersection because every day that gets backed up quite badly all the way almost to Short Road. So will there be, I guess, a longer left turn lane going onto Union Avenue, traveling, I guess, eastbound, what does the intersection improvements entail, I guess?
Sure, I will provide this conceptual plan. I could have Public Works speak onto what those.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa Peterson, Town Engineer. So what we're proposing on Blossom Hill Road, actually it would be a future bike lane, an area for a future bike lane that would be put in at a future time by the town. So we're getting the area or the space in order for us to be able to do that. But currently that was not required of the development to actually stripe that in.
All right, yes, Mr. Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. So, Ms. Peterson, is the bike lane, is that what's denoted by the green on your chart? Is that?
That's correct.
And is the intersection, I mean, are we familiar with how it gets backed up every day? And it's because the left turn bay is very short going on to Union Avenue. And I have a feeling it's because about 20 years ago they put in Highway 85 and there's an entrance to Highway 85. So a lot of people are taking Blossom Hill instead of 85 and trying to get on the freeway. So it gets very much backed up all the way to Short Road every day. Is that going to be wider, that left turn bay, or is only the bike lane going to be added? What kind of traffic flow enhancements are proposed here?
So currently what's proposed is on Union Avenue. You would be getting widening on Union Avenue that would allow you to have a right turn lane. And yeah, you can see it pretty well in that. Anyway, it will allow you to have a right turn lane so that folks won't have to be backed up that are trying to turn right onto Blossom Hill going westbound will not end up having to be blocked up by people that are trying to turn left to go east on Blossom Hill Road.
So primarily the enhancements will be for the folks turning right from Union Avenue to Blossom Hill Road, perhaps the morning commuters coming off of Highway 85 or something to that effect.
Well, I think ultimately we're also providing continuous or a connection between the sidewalk as well. So we're getting the sidewalk improvements and we're also getting the bike lane improvements that will be put in place with the development on Union.
Right, thank
and
you.
a crosswalk. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, if I could just add, we appreciate the council member's question about the left turn to northbound Union Avenue. That's beyond the nexus and the scope of this particular development. So that's why you're not seeing a lengthening of that left turn pocket.
Thank you.
Further questions of staff? Mr. Rennie.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. As long as Ms. Peterson's up here, I wanted to ask, I'd submitted a question about whether we could put one of those middle lanes on Union where you turn into it and wait before you enter the traffic lane, and you could wait in it to make a left turn lane. And I had specifically thought if we could add one for this property and also extend it down so that Lawson and Leewood would be able to do it. And your answer back was there wasn't enough transition zone. Could you explain that to me a little better?
Sure. So in order to put in that center turn lane, we would need to be taking 10 foot of that, of Union Avenue going northbound. And what happens is when we take that 10 foot and put in that center turn lane, eventually we have to transition those folks that are in that center turn lane back out onto northbound Union. Traffic codes tell us that in order to do that, we have to, there's a formula we have that requires a certain amount of transition. So those folks that are in that center lane can safely get back out and transition onto Union. So what we had said in our response was currently we don't have enough space for that transition where and keep the parking on Union on the west side. Now, if we remove the parking on Union on the west side in front of the development, we would be able to get enough of that transition, and that's because the center lane would move more towards the west.
Okay, so what I think you're telling me is you're expecting the cars need to get up to speed a little bit before they can move into the lane, and there's not enough room for it to get up to speed.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions of staff? Mr. Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor. Ms. Peterson, is there any plans to move the traffic signal that's at that intersection, now relocated as part of this whole rearrangement?
There was no plans for that.
And what is the total dollar amount of the improvements proposed that someone will be paying for at this intersection?
It's about $600,000.
Mr. Leonardis?
One more question. And it just occurred to me as I travel down Blossom Hill Road, there is no bike lane that I can recall all the way down Blossom Hill Road from somewhere about Short Road to this intersection. So by adding, I don't know what it is, maybe about 500 or 600 feet, it looks like, on Blossom Hill Road to the intersection, the bike lane will just kind of appear. And
So ultimately,
how does that work?
On Blossom Hill Road, what we're trying to do is get the space so that in the future, when the town comes in to put in a continuous bike lane down there, we would be able to do that. But there is an opportunity on Blossom Hill Road to detour some of the bikes off of one of the sections there, an area that actually is within the county, and then pull them back in with a bike route.
Thank you.
Further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. Now the appellant team can come forward, and the team will have a collective 10 minutes for its presentation.
Sorry, vertically challenged. Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the Town Council. My name is Charlie Brunitsky, and I'm going to do the introduction portion and discuss some of the legal issues for the applicant. Just by way of background, I've been a real estate and land use construction attorney for 30 years, but I also have a perspective similar to yours. I live in Foster City currently, and I spent 4 years on the planning commission there. I'm currently in my 7th year on their city council serving as the vice mayor. So I've also sat in your seat and seen these kinds of things. And so I kind of talk about that from that perspective. The history of this project is approaching its second year since it came for review through the advisory committee back in August of 2014. And at that time, they looked at a number of issues, but one of the issues that they looked at the time, traffic safety, because these lots could actually, at least 2 of them could actually have ingress and egress on Blossom Hill. But they decided that that really wasn't the safest thing to do, that it was much safer to do it through Union. And after the advisory committee meeting, there was probably a year or more where planning staff and the applicant were together going over all the possibilities of what to do with this project. And you probably already know this, but I have some land use experience here in Los Gatos, and I can tell you that your planning staff reputation is that they're tough. And I say that not as an insult, but as a compliment. If I thought they were unfair, that'd be an insult, but they're tough. They make you dot your I's and cross your T's. And so if there were issues as basic as failure to meet the Subdivision Map Act, I would have thought that the planning staff would have pointed that out. But in fact, the planning staff, after more than a year of review of all this, went to the Planning Commission and recommended that this project go forward. In that first meeting back in January, the Planning Commission asked a number of questions of the applicant and also asked planning staff to go back and take a look at the traffic issues. And so the applicant and staff went back and spent another 2 months looking at that issue, and they came back last month before the Planning Commission again. And in a detailed review, staff explained why this is a safe project, why this is the best outcome, why this is in fact improvement on the current safety condition at that corner. And even as late as the desk memo today answering a council member's question, staff seems to take the very same position, is that today, I went by here earlier today, and right now it's a pretty dangerous intersection if you wanted to walk around it. I saw it because at the time I came, there's this huge backup, and probably I'd say maybe 2 in 10 cars turn right, most turn left. And they're stuck in that backup as well. And this is in the evening. I assume it would be different in the morning commute like it is everywhere else. But what this project does is two things. It provides better safety for all the pedestrians because it will provide sidewalk all around the corner, and it provides a right turn lane to ameliorate some of the ongoing traffic and backup on Union. And so, from the safety sense, no one's exiting or entering directly onto Blossom Hill. They are coming in and out on Union, and considering that these are single-family homes, and there was a single-family home there, even if you assume 3 cars per single-family home, that's an extra 6 cars, 12 trips a day. When we talk about traffic, we talk about people coming and going. So 12 more trips a day, that's not really going to change the safety issue here, especially considering that the road is being widened. So instead of there's a little fence there right now, and then it's the property that's owned by the applicant, and that's going to be road, and that'll be the right turn lane. And the applicant, to get back to one of the questions that the council members raised with regards to the striping, the applicant is going to dedicate the road and the sidewalk and is prepared, if the decision is made how to stripe it by the town, to stripe it as they want, provided it's done, before the project's over. So you can decide what works best for that. This is a proposal, a concept proposal. This proposal was reviewed not by outside consultant and also by the town's traffic engineer. Everybody in this situation, all of the professionals thought this was a good project. And the issues, so let me get to the issues raised by the Planning Commission. And the first one was under Section B of the Subdivision Map Act, that it doesn't comply with the general plan. I'm sure you read the transcript, and you'll see that B is kind of an afterthought. During the motion process, they're going to make a motion under C and D, and they sort of throw in B. And in the current staff report, it says, well, that's based on land use element, page 1 and page 4 of the general plan. Well, those are the introduction sections. Those are not the sections that say, okay, for this particular area where these are the zones and the types of land use we have. It's just part of the introduction section. And those sections were not referenced directly during the meeting. In fact, the issue of the Subdivision Map Act was never raised until at the last minute one of the neighbors raised the issue in something filed at 5 o'clock in the afternoon on the day of that hearing, and then raised halfway through the hearing. A lot of what I've said is already part in the paper. The issue under subsection C, you can see that the staff and the applicant addressed every single one of those issues to the satisfaction of the staff to recommend this project. The density of the project, each and every one of these lots is more than the minimum required size for the lot. That excuse me just a second. Oh, I'm sorry. I know what I wanted to cover. There's one other point that I wanted to make, because I see that I'm sort of taking everyone else's time, so I apologize for that. There's also a section in the California Government Code, and it's section 65589.5, and that has to do with approval requirements when you have a housing development. And I know it doesn't seem like it, but this is, by that statute, a housing development. And it requires a series of specific findings, none of which were made in the context of what was done by the Planning Commission here. So I think that's fundamentally the problem here, is that this project, there's 3 single-family homes here of reasonable size on lots in excess of the size required for them. There's additional features that the town would get by approving this. The staff consistently, even as late as today's desk item, thinks this is a good project. So we think it's a good project, and we think it's a good addition to the town of Los Gatos. We think it's consistent with the general plan, and we ask you to grant our appeal and allow this project to go forward. So if there's any questions, I'm not the technical person, so if there's any questions that we have the entire staff here to answer those. But if there's questions of me, I'm happy to answer those as well.
What I'm going to suggest or request is that your entire team finish its presentation. If you haven't, do you have any more time?
I have about a minute and a half.
All right. They get the full 10 minutes. And if anyone else wants to address us for a minute and a half, and then we will address our questions, if any, to your team.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Bill Betchert. My wife and I own the property as a joint venture of a couple of our trusts. And we really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you and make this appeal. It's, in our opinion, it's a wonderful project for the town and for the neighborhood, and it provides considerable public improvement to the perimeter of the project. We think it's an opportunity that the town should take advantage of, and we've consistently had that opinion and have worked with our team to provide that. And so I just want to second everything that Charlie said and answer questions that remain from your point of view, especially questions you'd like to direct staff.
Thank you. All right, so now we have, the only cards I have actually are from the appellant team. The only cards I have so far are from the appellant team. If anybody else wants to address us, you should have the cards up to staff. But going to the council right now, do you have any questions for the appellant's team? Well, I do. So I will direct this to Mr., I'm assuming it's Mr. Bronitsky. You'll come on up. What I thought I heard you say, and this is what I want to clarify, is that the Planning Commission made its decision based on the Subdivision Map Act and finding that it did not, the project didn't comply with the general plan, but they didn't make the requisite findings under the Subdivision Map Act or the general plan. On our staff report, pages 4 through 7, I'm sorry, 4 through 5, the staff report talks about the findings made by the Planning Commission for both the general plan and the Subdivision Map Act. Is that a misstatement? Did that not occur? You could please help me out here.
So for subsection B, what happened was, in the process of a motion being made under C and D, there was a small amount of discussion, and again, this is just from reading the transcript. I wasn't there. There was a small amount of discussion on B, and they sort of swept B in during that. Now, there was discussion earlier from a member of the public about two things in the land use element of your general plan, and that was small town feel was one of them, and I'm sorry, the other one just escapes me for just a second. If I could look at my notes, but the staff report cites pages LU1 and LU4, which is the land use element of your general plan for that. But those specific references were not made at the time, nor were those findings specifically adopted by the Planning Commission at the time on that issue. Now, as to the other items, so item B was the design or improvements of the proposed subdivision is, C, that the site is not physically suitable for the type of development. And they discussed in the staff report the lot configuration. The lot configuration was satisfactory to the staff. It's 3 single-family lots, each one in excess of the 10,000 square feet that it needs to be for that. The frontage requirement, there was an issue because ingress and egress are not on Blossom Hill. And staff said it doesn't need to be, that it just needs to be the possibility. And so what staff said they meant by that was, so if it was a huge cliff and you couldn't really get to the property from Blossom Hill, they wouldn't consider that frontage. But you can get, in fact, one alternative is to put 2 driveways on Blossom Hill. But no one ever thought that was the safest thing to do. Everyone thought that this concept of the shared driveway was much better. It was approved by everyone within the town professionals, including fire. They're all satisfied with that. So, I'm sorry. I want to make sure I fully answer your question.
Well, you're going to get another chance.
Okay.
I'm trying to understand how you're saying the Planning Commission erred. And I thought you had said that they didn't make the requisite findings under the general plan or the subdivision map act. So I don't want to put words in your mouth. Why don't you tell me how they erred?
So here's what okay. I'm going to turn back into a lawyer for you. So I apologize. No one likes to listen to law talk, but
I do.
So, well, that makes 2 of us. But two is okay. It's more than usual. So the way the law works here is it comes from a case called Topanga Canyon Citizens versus the County of LA. And what it says is that the findings have to be somehow tied to the facts so you can trace the rationale. So you can't just say, okay, it violates subsection B or C. You actually have to tie it back to facts that are relevant to the project itself. So if you want to tie those facts back to the project itself, it's never, starting with B, how are 3 single-family lots inconsistent with small town? I don't think there's any factual basis for that. So and then the next thing I was going for with C, if you take the whole list that's in the staff report, you'll see that for each one of them, factually, they don't tie back to support the finding. So I was talking about lot configuration and frontage. There is frontage. The staff said there was frontage. They agree with this. Shared driveway. There's other situations. I think there's another situation similar to this on a shared driveway just down the street. Emergency vehicle access. That was another one of the rationale. Fire's approved that there's full emergency vehicle access. The shared driveway will be built so that the truck can go. The engines can come on and they can turn around and they can leave. The topography, the objection to the topography was the building of the retaining wall. The reason for building the retaining wall is so we can provide you the sidewalk. So the retaining wall isn't necessary. I was there. The slope is fairly moderate. Yeah, there is a slight grade change from the lot to Blossom Hill. But in order to provide a safe sidewalk, we're going to put in a retaining wall in there. So there's nothing really about that. And then the location of the project and the traffic. Again, all of the professional staff, including the town's traffic engineer, felt that this was a safe alternative. So when you say that they made the recitation to the code section, but none of the facts support the finding, because every one of those facts can be disproven and was disproven to the satisfaction of the staff.
Thank you. Other questions? Seeing none? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
The applicant team or appellant team will have the opportunity to come up for 5 minutes at the end. I do have another card somewhere here. Amanda Wilson. I'm sorry? All right, so you're part of the appellant team too. All right, do we have a card? I thought we had a card from somebody.
It's Jan Murray, Mayor. I believe Jan Murray.
All right.
Turned in a card.
Okay. And is that part of the appellant team?
That is not.
All right, well then, will you come forward, please? You'll have 3 minutes.
The development started prior to the members and the planning commission here to the council. I'm a little lost on what's being approved or not approved. So I'll just kind of quickly summarize what our concerns are.
Is her mic on?
Okay, how's this? So looking at the traffic, the proposed street plan may make sense to people who don't live in the neighborhood or travel there frequently. And if that's part of the approval, then that's a concern to a lot of the neighbors, is that the lane plan is not a good plan yet. And we have explained in various scenarios where the issues lie. If that's not part of it, then the next component is how that driveway is going to work and how people are going to get into and out of it safely. Because I think they've addressed already the emergency vehicle ingress and egress. And that presumably isn't an issue if that's been approved. And the other issue that concerns us is the water and runoff management, that it's an experimental process that relies on CCNRs. And again, if y'all would want to live below that water management system and the engineers are happy with it, we're not going to oppose it, but it is an experiment. So we have a shared driveway experiment with no pedestrian sidewalk. We have a water management experiment, and we have clear cutting of trees, and we have significant grading of a clay soil up beneath a hill. And so those are all kind of property safety and human safety issues. And then there's the traffic, which I think is separate from the developers. It's really something to work on with the town. And then lastly, I don't know if the house plans and the surface area coverage are part of this, but they've included the driveway square footage in their ratios. I don't know if that affects the results and the appropriateness to the property, but it is a question about whether you reclassify a road as a driveway and then you get to not have sidewalks and you get to have extra impervious areas. So if the water management meets your, if each of those things do meet your criteria, then I understand that they've been working on this a long time. I just need to know that my house isn't going to get flooded as a result of this and that emergency vehicles can get to our properties.
Thank you. Before you leave, just noting you are the individual who gave us this sheet of items, correct?
Yes.
All right. Thank you very much. And do we have questions for Ms. Murray? Seeing none, thank you. All right, I have no cards, so I will go back, if needed, to rebut to the appellants. Team, you have 5 minutes.
I gave my introduction at the end of our 10 minutes. We do appreciate the chance to be here. We've very much appreciated the individual discussions we've had with each council member, and we especially appreciated the questions in today's desk item that were very thoughtful from the council member and very on-target answered by the staff. Regarding the potential left turn lane, if we had to give up parking in front of our development in order to make that left turn lane feasible, we would be agreeable to doing that. Since Charlie is so experienced at looking at these matters from your point of view, I'll let him finalize the wrap-up and hit anything else technical. The one thing I do want to say is that the staff says in their staff report that the area of the easements does count in lot area for figuring out allowable floor area. There's nothing in the code that prohibits that.
I'd say, okay, so no more lawyer speak. So let me address the things Ms. Murray said. What she called the water management, it's the drainage system. So it's in each one of the staff reports. I think it's also in the most recent desk item. Everybody, all the professionals agree that actually drainage will be better in that area, including in the neighbors area, at the end of this than it is today. So I think that's clearly addressed to all of the professional staff satisfaction. With regards to the square footage, staff made it very clear, including in the staff report for this evening's meeting, that the easement portion, the shared driveway, counts under the town's code for the square footage requirements. And so that is also really not an issue. And then last, but clearly not least, is safety access. The fire marshal, the fire department was out there. They are satisfied that they will be able to get adequate access to that area to protect anyone in that area from whatever they need, fire or ambulance service or whatever. That's fully compliant. So all of those things have been addressed. Now, to wrap this up, I don't pretend to know more about your town than you do. That's absurd. But I'm not without some understanding. My wife's family moved to Los Gatos in the 1960s. She went to Van Meter. She's a graduate of Los Gatos High. My brother-in-law graduated Bellarmine. I attended his graduation. I attended my sister-in-law's graduation from Los Gatos High. We had our engagement parties and wedding parties here 30 years ago. My father-in-law passed away in the house they built on Via Santa Maria a couple of years ago, and they built that house in the 60s and lived there. I've spent a lot of time here in this particular town, and I've come as close as someone who doesn't live here to understand what makes it unique and what makes it special. And I'm not your standard hired gun. I don't stand in front of town councils or city councils arguing that you should give this big corporation a big multi-family, high-density project. I'm fortunate enough that I pick and choose the times I do this nowadays. And so I looked at this project for the applicant, and I thought this was a good project for him, and I think it's a good project for the town of Los Gatos. And I hope you do as well. So we ask that you overturn the decision of the Planning Commission and allow this project to move forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Questions? Mr. Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. Excuse me. Mr. Belcher, before he left the podium, mentioned something about giving up parking to address the left turn lane. Is that, can we get some clarification on what that could possibly be?
If I understood the traffic or the town engineer correctly, I believe she said that the left turn lane shown here into our driveway, as you start north on Union Avenue, is too short, and there isn't enough transition. She did mention that if the right-hand turn lane from Union Avenue to Blossom Hill Road were moved over 10 feet, and the space for the bike path were moved over 10 feet, and the left turn lane going from Union to Blossom Hill were moved over 10 feet, there would be room for a greater transition. If we have to give up those 3 parking places on Union Avenue, and the city wants us to do that and to install that left turn lane, we would not object.
Thank you.
Any other? Mr. Rennie.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. I have a question, but I need to make a comment on this. I think we're confused and we should go to staff afterwards. The left turn lane doesn't need as much space as a middle turn into and accelerate out lane, so we should come back to that. But let me ask my question of the applicant. So my question is, during this process, did you get a lot of requests from changes from neighbors And could you tell me what kinds of things you changed to incorporate the neighbors' needs and desires?
We got many requests and we made many changes. And our architect is much more familiar with the list. We did include a list of them in our appeal letter, and that is available in your packet. The biggest, most difficult thing was a discussion about lowering the height of the houses because the neighbors to the north felt they were overbearing. We lowered them considerably. We moved one back considerably, and we made all of the constructive changes that we thought we could still have a viable project. And if Gary wants to add any more to that, he'd be welcome to. But we bent over backwards to please the neighborhoods, and especially on house height and on traffic.
And you did these changes before it went to Planning Commission or after it went to Planning Commission?
There was some both. We talked with neighbors continuously from the fall of 2014, and I believe the initial submittal to the Planning Commission reflected many of those conversations, but Gary would have to tell me for sure.
And while he's coming up, if you could fold into Mr. Rennie's questions, what changes, if any, have been made since the Planning Commission in March?
Good evening, Gary Colsett, architect, applicant. Not only did we change the houses, the height of the homes, especially on Lot 2, we lowered that a total of 3 feet. Moved it back 3 feet from the current original position. The other homes also moved back and lowered as well. We also changed the roof design on for the house on Lot 2 to further help with those massing height concerns of Jan and her husband Peter. The other big change that we went through was, and this was before we got to Planning Commission, was this issue of drainage. We put together a drainage plan based on working very, very closely with previous engineering staff, no longer with the town. We got all the way through our peer review for the C3, and basically we were moving forward when there was a changeover in the town's engineering staff, and also we got comments and concerns from all the neighbors saying that they didn't think our drainage plan was going to work. The drainage plan was very straightforward, like we do on almost every other project. What we ended up having to do was completely change the system that we use to a bioretention system that doesn't infiltrate into the ground. What it does is it actually captures all the water with impervious surfaces, driveways, etc. We normally would go permeable, and we capture all that water and we treat it, and then we let it outfall slowly into the storm drain system. On top of that, I just want to add that our layers of retaining walls that we add at Blossom Hill to support Blossom Hill sidewalk and road, there's drainage behind those walls that capture subsurface water. The gutter and sidewalk at Blossom Hill captures all the water, that surface water that runs on Blossom Hill that would normally run into the lot, and as well as all of our drainage on our site drains away from the north against the grain, if you will, and we also have a retaining wall that is right just before our property line on the north, which has another additional drain to pick up any extra water that would be behind that wall. So we are very confident that the situation that the neighbors to the north face today will be improved.
Further questions?
Thank you.
Mr. Rennie, no. All right. Mr. Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. I don't know if this is for Mr. Colsat or somebody else on the team, but there's a significant amount of intersection improvements being proposed. And I said earlier, someone is going to be paying for that. Who is going to be asked to pay for that? Mr. Belcher, I guess you have the answer to.
Maybe I can address that if you don't mind. I am personally not paying for it, but all of the improvements that are required for this project are being borne by the developer. And we would like to talk to Ms. Peterson because her estimates are much lower than we find. We're getting $800,000 to $850,000 estimates on these. So if we can get it cheaper, it would be great. It'd be a great coup for us. But it's quite a hit. To be spread out over 3 homes is still a big hit. And so that's a major thing. I want to just point out that we've been asked to dedicate the property 25 feet along Union, 15 feet along Blossom Hill, the extent of the property, and make road improvements that have always been passed on. We'll do that in the future. We'll work it out. We'll work it out later. And as a result of working with neighbors, concerns were brought up on traffic. We hired a traffic engineer to go ahead and start this process earlier. We've been working with the town staff on this. That's why we're still calling it a conceptual, because it's not approved. It's not a working drawing yet, but it has been thoroughly reviewed. If we need to make adjustments and changes as a condition of this approval, we are amenable to that, and we certainly want to make this a successful project in all aspects.
Thank you.
Further questions? Thank you, sir.
Welcome.
I will now close the public testimony portion of this agenda item and look to the council once again for questions, comments, motion. Mr. Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. I have questions for staff on the intersection improvements that I know are on our list of proposed capital improvement projects. And I think that list is something in the neighborhood of $40 million to $50 million of potential capital improvement projects to improve traffic throughout town. So just wondering if there is any variation between what was maybe initially proposed at this intersection and on our capital improvements list and what the applicant is proposing, or what is the proposed drawing, which has disappeared from the screen.
So what we're asking the applicant to put in is something that is consistent with our capital improvement program, and what we're asking for is just what we can ask for because of the nexus. Ultimately, we do want to get bike lanes down Blossom Hill Road. There's other improvements that we want to do. So we're asking specifically just for this project, those improvements that are a nexus from our capital project program.
Mr. Leonard.
One more. Thank you, Mayor. So, Ms. Peterson, again, I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but I'm assuming that there is some alterations that could be made to the drawing, such as enhancing that left turn lane that goes onto Union Avenue as a possibility. I do appreciate the green bike lane, but it seems like that takes away from the ability potentially to enhance that left turn lane being longer, which really backs up the traffic. So is there any flexibility with being able, with moving forward, assuming that the council approves this project, to look at some more details of that intersection and make that intersection more conducive to the traffic flow, as opposed to only looking at the bicycle lanes being added in the future?
We could certainly take a look at it. Ultimately, we would probably need to talk to the town attorney to verify that anything we were looking at, the town attorney felt was a nexus. Ultimately, we've asked for what we felt we could ask for, but we certainly could take a look at it.
Thank you.
Other questions, comments, motion? Mr. Rennie.
I'll go ahead and add some comments. There are quite a few. I haven't spent a lot of time on many years on the Planning Commission, so I spent a lot of time trying to study this and wrote down a lot of thoughts that I had and asked a lot of questions that staff had to answer. I don't like saying that Planning Commission erred, but the harder I studied this application, the less I'm able to make the same findings that they did, and I'll go through my thoughts. The Planning Commission made the finding the project violates the general plan because it does not support the small town character. I'm having trouble seeing how adding 2 houses changes our small town character. I'll skip some of my thoughts here. The lot size, the FAR, the house size, the setbacks are all within our requirements, and it hasn't been mentioned here, but in our report, they all match the sizes of the houses and the size of the lots in the neighborhood here. So I'm still having trouble with how there could be a finding that it doesn't match the general plan or the resulting ordinances. I'll skip that thought. The Planning Commission also made the finding that the site was not suitable because the lot was on the corner, it had a shared drive, and the overall safety issue of it. Again, I can't make that finding. The shared drive is not uncommon in Los Gatos. In fact, the property just to the west of it has a shared drive with 4 units on it. The project includes a fire truck turnaround and allows all the vehicles to turn themselves around and come out in a forward direction out of it. And they're basically at the same distance from the corner of Blossom Hill as Leawood Court across the way. So I'm having trouble seeing how that's really any different from what exists on a court that has at least twice as many homes on it. And when I look at it, in fact, I think the project is a large safety gain, which actually been arguing. Was my assessment before I heard the argument here. Currently the corner is quite dangerous for both pedestrians and bikes. The pavement's really no wider than 1 lane, both on Union and Blossom Hill at that corner, forcing bicyclists into the car travel lane. I used to live 2-3 blocks from here for 14 years, and I've been around this corner many times and on my bike, and I still ride past this corner on the way home sometimes, and it really, if you can think about, if you get stopped at that light coming on Blossom Hill going west, I guess it is, you have to start uphill, clip in, and you're stuck in the lane of travel until you get past this property trying to get up a hill. So the adding of the width there allows, even without the bike lane, allows you to get out of the way of the lane of travel. So I see that as a huge improvement. I've gotten several emails from neighbors in this area wanting more sidewalks, connectivity through this area, and this certainly is adding to that. It's not in all the places. They'd like them on the other side of Blossom Hill. Not mentioned, but I was told somewhere that, I think in our staff report or answer to my questions, that they're going to add a pedestrian crosswalk to get across Blossom Hill here. So that certainly is adding to the safety of it all. Let's see, where am I in my notes here? Just a sec. The Planning Commission also made the finding that the site is not suitable for the density, yet the density is really the same as all of the surrounding subdivision. As we mentioned, all the lot sizes and the house sizes are consistent and so forth. So I can't make that finding either. My biggest concern with the whole thing was we're going to lose a lot of nice trees, but several of them are in the dedication, which adds to the safety significantly. So I guess that's worth the loss. And I know we could move the houses around maybe to save some of the trees, but that may affect the safety, and I think it brings them closer to the neighbors, which was kind of undesirable. So I know that they're going to replant many trees, so I guess I can live with that. I'd say, so overall, I'm in favor of the resolution that's in attachment 12, which grants an appeal of the decision of the Planning Commission. And I won't do that. I won't make that a motion yet because there are findings that need to be mentioned with it unless other council members are interested in going this direction.
Thank you. Further discussion. Mr. Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. For me, I look at this purely as not whether the Planning Commission erred or abused or anything of that sort. I'm sure they had some reasoning behind their findings. However, I look at it in terms of the council is going to have discretion that the Planning Commission may not have had the discretion. And to me, I look at the financial aspect of this intersection. First of all, I travel this almost every day, and it's very dangerous. I've seen accidents at the intersection, primarily due to that left turn lane turning onto Union Avenue being short, and the folks who continue, whatever it is, eastbound, I guess, on Blossom Hill Road. It's just a tight squeeze going through there. So, not to mention the lack of the bike lanes and the sidewalks and the other things. So I look at this as an opportunity for the town to address that intersection, which is on our capital improvements list of unfunded projects. And that is primarily what I'm looking at here. I look at, the homes. I like the design of the homes. They are on large lots. I don't look at this as being like somebody trying to shove 30 homes on a 1 acre parcel or something like that. Or PUD or any of these things that we've dealt with in the recent past. This is a reasonable request, I think, that the applicant is making to put 3 homes on large lots. When it comes to the drainage, I'm sure that that will be figured out. That was a concern. We did receive correspondence on that, and I want to address that. But I trust that the drainage will be better at the intersection because that is something that is very important to get done. We don't want to have any flooding, and we don't want to have any neighbors flooding. We don't want to have the new homes being flooded. So I'm confident that will get taken care of with the engineering. When it comes to the shared driveway, not the most ideal situation, but it does exist. I think very close to this existing, as was discussed by a previous council member, this existing proposal. There's a similar situation going on there. And if one were to when Blossom Hill Road was put in and when those homes were put in during the 1960s with their driveways facing Blossom Hill Road, probably almost no one was driving down Blossom Hill Road at that time, and now that road is very well traveled. So I don't think if it were built today, it would be built the same way. Probably no one's driveway would be on Blossom Hill Road that way. So I don't see that to be an issue. But what I'm really looking at is the benefit to the town and the potential of getting this intersection fixed once and for all. And getting, I feel bad that the applicant has to foot the bill up to $850,000 for something like this, but I guess they're willing to do that, and that's what we call a nexus to the project being put in. So I would be in support of, I guess we would say, upholding the granting the appeal. For the purposes of not that the Planning Commission erred or abused, but that the council has discretion over the money portion, which is throwing a significant amount of money at that intersection, which, by the way, I think is probably, if it is $850,000, more than what we collected from Netflix, I think, to put in their 22-acre development. So I think that is a very good deal for the town of Los Gatos.
Further discussion, comments, motion. Mr. Rennie.
I'll go ahead and try to put it in a motion then. Using the motion in attachment 12 that we grant an appeal of the decision of the Planning Commission and approve a request to demolish an existing single-family residence, subdivide 1 lot into 3 lots, construct 3 single-family residences, and remove large protected trees on property zoned R110. Do you want the APN number, 523-42017? I believe we also, in addition to that, the motion needs to make some findings, if I can find the findings. I guess the first finding, it's exempt under CEQA. The second finding is that it's required. Help me out on this.
Are you moving to approve, make the motion under attachment 12?
Yes. Can I just say 12 and not say all the findings?
The findings are contained in Exhibit A of attachment 12.
Okay. So
All
I'll
right.
just say include the findings in Exhibit A of attachment 12.
All right, we have a motion to basically grant the appeal, incorporating attachment 12 and Exhibit A to attachment 12. Do we have a second? Mr. Leonardis.
I would like to second the motion and would like to ask the maker of a motion to consider a couple changes, or additions, I should say. First of all, I want to compliment the Planning Commission because I think they do a wonderful job for us. And this has nothing to do with the items that they pointed out. This, again, has to do with an item that was outside of their purview, which to me is the amount of money that will go towards fixing that intersection to make it safe and make it better for the traffic flow and take it off of our list of capital improvement projects. I want to emphasize, as in addition to the motion, that we look at taking that left-hand turn lane that turns onto Union Avenue from Blossom Hill Road to see if we can somehow extend that to be longer to incorporate more cars into the queue to help eliminate the backup. And I also want to incorporate into the motion that the town and the applicant work together. Perhaps we can, we hear $600,000, we hear $850,000. If we need to move a traffic signal or something to make that whole intersection better, I think we need to cap the applicant's charges towards that intersection at $850,000. And if it costs a little more than that and the town has to participate, that the town would participate, but get the whole intersection done and make it good all at one time. So that would be the changes I'd like to add to the motion.
All right, so you are, you might be seconding the motion. I will go to the maker of the motion. You have a request to amend your motion to have a consideration of lengthening Blossom Hill onto Union. Do you accept that?
Yes, I agree with considering lengthening that.
And do you agree to amending your motion to have the applicant's contributions capped at $850,000?
That sounds reasonable to me, yes.
All right, so we have a motion and a second discussion. Ms. Sydock.
Okay, I've been fairly quiet on this one just because it's a rather difficult decision on this one. Certainly the project on its own, I see the merits involved with it, particularly with the drainage. I think the drainage issues that were raised during the Planning Commission hearing are going to be well addressed. And knowing the area in that vicinity and the prior projects that have been there, I understand the concerns that the residents have. I'm going to deny the motion, though, just because to approve it would mean that I would have to agree with one of the three statements. And I understand that there is other considerations that are being considered by my other council members, but there was significant discussion. There were two Planning Commission hearings on the actual lot size and whether or not the three homes with the ingress and the egress. And I do think that there was significant enough discussion that substantiates the findings that they made in denying it. And so I don't think there was error or abuse. And again, while I see the merits of the project, I can't make the finding that they abused their discretion and that their decision should be overturned. So.
Thank you. Before I make my comments, I have a question of staff. The capping of the applicant's contribution, to Nexus improvements at $850,000 is, first of all, something that I don't recall this council ever doing, and so I would like staff to weigh in on this before we go any further, before I go any further.
I don't know if that's ever been done before either. Certainly, it's legal if that's council's discretion to do that, but I don't believe it's ever been done on other projects. They have not been around long enough to make, a long-term, but Joel doesn't remember it being done.
I don't recall.
Well, putting aside whether or not you remember it, what is staff's input on the reasonableness of this component of the motion?
I think it's first fair to clarify whether or not it includes the value of the land dedication. And the way I interpret the motion as it stands currently is that it would be on top of, that the land dedication is separate, and you're really only trying to cap the value of the physical improvements that would be needed to effectuate the changes that are shown on the map. We might need, these are conceptual, so additional engineering and additional work is still needed. So whether 850,000 is a reasonable cap, it's probably too early to know.
Before we get to whether or not it encompasses the land dedication or not, if we assume, and I'm not assuming this, but if we assume for this question that it does not include the land dedication, then what's staff's input on this motion?
Initially, I would say if it didn't include the land dedication, that would clearly not be enough. The land dedication is required by town code, so we would look at that separately and look at the cap to be the off-site public improvements, not including the land, being at the 850 cap.
I'm not hearing you. If you exclude the land dedication, are you saying the $850,000 is an acceptable provision of this motion?
I would defer to Ms. Pravetti's earlier comments unless the town engineer has anything further to offer.
So when I gave my number previously for the $600,000, that did not include the land dedication. So if the cap was $850,000, not including the land dedication, that would give us enough buffer probably to be able to get the improvements in and any changes.
You? All right. Well, I'm sort of like the vice mayor. I have concerns about the motion. So let me start with the small town character. I think that the findings that the Planning Commission made were actually substantiated in the record. These are three very large homes, and they are very large homes that are going to be built on property that removes all the trees on a very wooded lot. So the Planning Commission made findings, and I believe that the findings that the Planning Commission made were, in fact, supported by the record. I don't think, I understand that the FAR, the FAR, is factually acceptable under our ordinance. But having said that, I also know that just because a size, a FAR, is acceptable under our ordinance, that does not mean that one always gets the maximum FAR in their developments. And then, having gone out again to see that neighborhood and having been there periodically for many other applications over the years, the other homes that have been built in that area are large homes. And so it is surrounded by what are now very large homes. I understand that we're getting street improvements. I understand that these street improvements improve the safety. But you have to, what happens is that those street improvements are attached to an acceptable application. You don't say, we want these street improvements, and so therefore we will approve the application and have these street improvements driving the application. I certainly agree with other members of this council who express concern about that intersection. I totally agree. I totally agree with the right-hand turn, left turn from Blossom Hill onto Union, right turn and left turn from Union onto Blossom Hill. I agree with the fact that we don't have sidewalks there, and I wished we had them there already. But again, you can't say, okay, applicant, we are going to have you install $600,000, $800,000 worth of improvements, and because you're doing that, we are going to approve your application no matter what. So at this point, actually, I can appreciate what Mr. Leonardis said. I can appreciate what Mr. Rennie has said. I can appreciate what Ms. Sayak said, and I don't actually know how I'm going to be voting on this yet. Mr. Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. I took into consideration many of the things that you said, and again, the way the neighborhood is around there, these homes are compatible. They're on large lots and there are large homes, and I don't think they would be out of character with the existing neighborhood. Conversely, if the homes were much smaller and crammed many more on the parcel, like we've seen in the past, that would be out of character with the neighborhood. So I think the proposal is reasonable. I thought about the Planning Commission's findings deeply, and I have to weigh the checks and the balances. I look at that. I agree with you in the sense where I don't want to approve a project regardless of what it is because I want the intersection improvements. I feel like that has happened before in the past when I've been on council, but I don't look at this particular project as being totally unreasonable considering the amount of the improvements that are being made. I think it very much fits the neighborhood. Again, I also am concerned about losing trees. I'm also concerned about the drainage, but I think those things have been addressed. But I think the overall benefit to Los Gatos will be greatly enhanced. I mean, I've witnessed accidents at this intersection. If one person gets hurt, I want to get this thing fixed as soon as possible and get it crossed off our CIP list, and this is an opportunity to do that. So I'm very much in favor of this scale that we're trying to balance here. And I don't think the project is totally unreasonable. Leave it at that.
Mr. Rennie.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. I'd like to ask staff two questions at this point. I probably should have asked earlier. So we're losing a lot of trees here, and they're going to be replacing a lot of trees. Are they also going to be paying into our tree fund, or is all the trees that they're replacing cover all, whatever the requirement is?
Yes, I can answer that
Ms.
question.
Walters.
They have to plant 144 24-inch box trees for the proposed removal. So that wouldn't occur on the site. So they will plant many of them and then pay into our in lieu fee the difference.
And so 24-inch refers to the size of the box, but how tall is a 24-inch tree typically?
It just depends on the species, and in this proposal, they've proposed a number of different type of species. They've proposed privacy screening trees along the northern edge. So it depends on the species, and they have a number of different types on site.
And my second question is about drainage. I know that the applicant gave us kind of a lengthy discussion of drainage, but I'd be curious to have staff to give their independent review of whether they think drainage is adequate or not.
So from engineering, I believe Mike Weiss will come up and address any questions you have about drainage.
Weiss, Associate Civil Engineer. Yes, the proposed drainage improvements are acceptable. They do improve the site. I'd like to clarify the earlier comments. The the initial peer review of the drainage was not approved, and that led to the ultimate change and changes to the plan. I'd be happy to answer any further questions.
So one further one, I wanted to make sure, so one of my concerns is as soon as we open, right now you've got pretty steep Blossom Hill, so the water will run down and there's a drain that then goes along the west edge of the property on the neighbor's drainage, and what misses that would just drain into dirt and sink into the ground. Once we open this up to sidewalk and gutter, it's all going to drain down into this corner. How do we know that the water's not going to pool in the middle of the intersection?
Okay, so you're talking of going around the corner here?
Yes.
Okay, so there is a significant slope going along this gutter pan here, and combined with that and the cross slope of Union Avenue, it should convey all of the drainage within that gutter. I will also point out that if anything were to pass beyond this biopond, there are additional storm drain structures within the public right-of-way north of the project.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions or discussion? Mr. Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. I want to go back to a point that was raised by staff about the $850,000. I didn't intend for that dollar figure to incorporate any dedication or land value. In my mind, that was a number that was given to me by the applicant, what they had received, perhaps in the form of estimates, and then staff had come up with a number that was far less, which was $600,000. So I thought there was, as Ms. Peterson said, enough of a disparity between those two figures to, it seemed like it was a good ceiling point that would be fair.
And Madam Mayor, if I may, thank you for that clarification. I think it's just important that if the motion were to move forward and the motion asks for a more comprehensive fix to the intersection, if the cost should exceed the $850, then that would be on our, would have to come from our own budget. And that would be a little bit contradictory to our typical practice where the developer is responsible to pay for the improvements that are directly associated with their proposed development. So just on further thinking about this, just be aware that, it is our practice that development pays its own way for the required improvements.
Let me follow up on that. First of all, the maker of the motion has tied the appeal to an issue or policy over which the commission did not have discretion to modify or address, and specifically the responsibility of the town for a capital improvement project to improve the Union Blossom Hill intersection. With due respect to the maker of the motion, is that an item on our capital improvement project list?
I think the list that we've been discussing is the list that was created in relation to our traffic impact fees, which is the list of projects that are needed to address growth-related improvements throughout the town. Those are not in the CIP. Those projects are projects that we've identified as needed projects over time. We don't have that list with us. I do believe that Union and Blossom Hill is on that list, but I can't be 100% sure on that.
Okay. As we have this discussion, my thoughts, my personal thoughts, are clarifying. Based upon what was just stated, I am somewhat acceptable to saying that improving that intersection would get us into subsection C of the basis for granting an appeal. But I will not support the motion with the editor of the maximum contribution to Nexus improvements. So I will not be supporting the motion. All right, Mr. Rennie.
So my suggestion is that we remove that from the motion, the maximum Nexus payment, if Mr. Leonardis is also willing.
All right, so is the seconder of the motion will not second it with that provision?
I will remove the maximum number of 850,000.
All right, so we now have a motion that removes the 850,000, and I understand that's acceptable to you, Mr. Rennie, as the seconder?
Yes.
All right, further discussion. Mr. Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. So could we have somebody read back the new motion?
The motion is to adopt the resolution contained in Attachment 12 with Exhibit A that lists all of the findings that would essentially grant the approval and approve the proposed project, that the council is making finding C regarding the additional discretion. I have the language right in front of me. An issue or policy over which the commission did not have discretion to modify or address, but which is vested in the council for modification or decision, and that the applicant will consider lengthening the left turn pocket on Blossom Hill that provides for access going northbound on Union Avenue.
Thank you.
To the maker of the motion, does that accurately reflect your motion?
I think Mr. Rennie made the motion, but I seconded the
It
motion
does.
with
It
changes.
does, yes.
Okay, maker of the motion, all right. Very good. Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Passes 3-1, the vice mayor voting no. We will now take a 10-minute break. Calling the meeting back to order. We are on agenda item 11, architecture and site application for property located at 360 Bella Vista Avenue, Los Gatos. Start with staff report.
Thank you. Good evening. The proposed project was considered by the Planning Commission on March 9th of this year. The project includes a 2-lot subdivision, as well as demolition of the existing structures and construction of 2 new single-family residences. The Commission considered the proposal and approved the requested subdivision, but denied the 2 architecture and site applications for the new single-family residences. Their concerns were in regards to the size of the residences in relation to those in the immediate neighborhood, as well as massing from the street as it relates to the height of the residences and the size of the second floors. Most of the 2-story homes along Bella Vista Avenue excuse me, are partial 2 stories and are more encompassed in the roof massing. The applicant has appealed the denial of the 2 architecture and site applications based on the justification that the Commission erred or abused its discretion in that the proposed project complies with town code and the residential design guidelines. In addition, the applicant submitted revised drawings for the council to consider with increased front setbacks, reduced height, and reduced floor area, as discussed within your report. While the applicant has sought to address the concerns raised by the Commission, the residences remain larger than those in the immediate neighborhood, with greater massing from the street than any of those as well in the immediate neighborhood. As a result, staff recommends the council uphold the decision of the Planning Commission and deny the proposed applications. Additionally, if the council considers or believes that the revisions are moving in the right direction, the council could forward or could remand the applications to the Planning Commission for further consideration with any direction that they want the applicant or the Planning Commission to consider. This completes staff's report. We are here if you have any questions.
Questions of staff. Mr. Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. A couple years ago, we had a situation that was kind of similar to this on Shannon Road, where there was one house, and then the subdivision was approved to split it into 2 lots. And at the time, the argument was made by the applicant, well, if we would have just done this one house at a time, we would have got one house approved, and then we could have got the other one approved subsequently without it going to Planning Commission or Council or any of that kind of stuff. Is this one of those similar cases where it's kind of like they did the same thing and history's repeating itself and it's too late to go back in time and do it the other way?
I don't recall exactly that scenario. My recollection was more along the lines of the discussion as far as the broader context of the neighborhood, rather than relating to just the 225 of the residential design guidelines and how that broader context weighs into consideration for something like this. And I do think that's relevant to this discussion. If you go beyond, or were to include those residences to the rear, that discussion on massing is a different scenario, as well as you see more of this type of 2-story residences further to the south on Bella Vista Avenue as well.
Thank you.
Further questions of staff? See none. The appellant's team will have 10 minutes. I don't have any cards from any of you. But introduce yourselves. That's all right. They can introduce themselves.
Hi, Mayor and council members. I'm Michael Black, the applicant here. First, I'd like to say thank you very much for having us tonight. We're very excited about back in March during Planning Commission to get the subdivision actually approved. And now tonight we're going to be focusing more on the site and architecture aspect of the project. First off, John would like to say a little bit of something about as the owner of the property.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. My name is John Brady. I live at 20103 Foster Road. My wife and I have lived in this area over 40 years. We've lived on Foster Road 6 years or 7 years this summer. We have 3 adult children and families, young children. They all live in Los Gatos, and we're doing our best to keep them here, as expensive and as challenging as that is. The family that we would like to move into our home on Lot 2 is my daughter and her husband and their 3 children. As you can appreciate, we thoughtfully designed the homes to meet the needs of a young growing family, and we placed 4 bedrooms on a floor so that they could all be together at night since they're all under 5. We'd also had a heavy emphasis on a larger backyard. We don't want them playing in the front yard or in the street, so we provided for that. We closed on this property a year ago, and it's taken a long time to get to this point. We're very anxious to get started with construction, and we thank you for hearing us tonight. Thank you.
Chris Spalding, our architect, is going to give a little presentation.
Chris Spalding, architect. I hope you had a chance to look at the rendering, the colored rendering there of the houses. I've done a couple of houses on Bella Vista over the years. I also did, 25 years ago, I did Bella Vista Court, the little 7 houses there, which most people find to be very small town-like. So we chose an architecture that's common in town, very popular, nice, family-friendly, big front porches. Will fit in really nicely with that neighborhood once they're finished. What we always do with houses is to minimize the bulk as much as possible, to reduce the second-story mass as much as the square footage of the second story as much as possible, given the program of my clients, to not have any 2-story wall planes. We sited the houses so that the driveways separate the houses from the immediate neighbors to give the greatest available setback between the buildings. And we put the 2 buildings as close together they're 16 feet apart, so that we have more like 30 feet between the buildings with the existing houses. Now, since the Planning Commission hearing, we made some further adjustments. So the house on lot 1 was moved back 10 feet, and the house on lot 2 was moved back 5 feet. So now the house on lot 1 will have a 36-foot front setback. So it's 11 feet more than is normal, so the house won't seem so large when viewed from the street. And if you go up and down Bella Vista Avenue, there's quite a few, especially further south, there's quite a few larger houses that are actually quite close to the street. So this will, by moving it back so much, will really reduce that sense of bulk. The total floor area was reduced. On lot 1, it went down almost 200 square feet, and on lot 2, it went down almost 250 square feet, and that brings lot 2 down below the size, or equal to the size of the house across the street in floor area. And in both cases, especially on lot 1, which is closest to the neighbor, we took 3/4 of that square footage out of the second floor. And also on each house, the bedrooms were reduced by 1, because there was concern about how many people might possibly live in these houses. And then we moved both houses down a full foot. And then finally, I want to address on lot 1, if you look at our shadow study, which is on sheet A5, the shadows, the shadows only go onto the neighbor's yard in the winter, and in the winter morning they don't hit the house at all, and only start to shade the house afternoon, and then only a small portion of the house is hit by the shadow before it swings to the into the backyard, and by the time sunset hits, the shadow would be not even on their backyard. So for a 2-story house, really the shadow impacts are really pretty minor. So if anybody has any questions. Oh.
Just to reiterate what Chris was saying, we're obviously here today because of the issues of size and massing. We've got the largest lots on the block. Sometimes that's a good thing, sometimes it's a bad thing. We have 11,000 square foot lots, which is 2,000 square feet larger than our neighbors. That usually equates to a larger proposed home. With that said, we obviously have the proposed revisions that we've submitted that we'd like conditioned tonight. Those are 12-inch overall height reduction in the house, 198 square foot reduction in lot 1, 250 square feet reduction in lot 2, a 10-foot increased front setback in lot 1, and a 5-foot increased setback in lot 2. The allowable FAR in this is 3,322 square feet. We're at 3,016, 3124, which gives us FARs of 0.27 and 0.28 respectively. Down the street, our neighbors at 485 Bella Vista and 400 Bella Vista are at 0.33 and 0.34. Those are a 3,016 square foot home on a 9,000 foot lot. Same as lot 2, except 2,000 square foot smaller lot. At 400 Bella Vista, she's at a 2,446 square foot home on a 7,000 foot lot. Obviously, to the east, we've got Bluebird Lane. They're at 0.6 FAR right behind us. They're our neighbors 10 feet over. We can reach over and touch their house. They're very large houses, and as much as we like to say that they're not in our neighborhood, they are. They're in our backyard. The concerns of massing by our neighbors, we've done our best, and partly what we've done is lot 1, we've reduced the second story by 150 square feet. We took a whole bedroom off that floor and we said, you know what? We want to help our neighbor out. We don't want the shadows. We don't want the massing. We've also reduced the height of both homes by 1 foot. We've increased the setback by 10 feet. That hopefully preserves a view to the southern hills that I know is very important to her. Hopefully these concessions we've made going into City Council or the council meeting, hopefully you guys support them. Please let us know if you have any questions.
Any questions, Mr. Leonardis?
Thank you, Mayor Spector. Mr. Black, I was alluding to earlier a lot that we split on Shannon Road, and they put in 2 Craftsman homes. And I was thinking, as I see this happening in Los Gatos, 2 homes that go in, they're not identical twins, but they're twins, whatever those other kind are called, non-identical twins, in the sense where they have the same kind of architectural details, they have the same kind of setback from the curb. And when you look at Los Gatos, how it was formed through the sands of time, you go down a street and you see one house is set back a little further, one house might be twisted, one house is a colonial, one house is a Victorian, one's a Tudor, one's a Craftsman, and that's kind of the way Bella Vista is now. It's very kind of eclectic. So one of the things I think about when I look at your plan is, did you ever consider changing one of the elevations of the houses from, say, like the Craftsman style to maybe a Mediterranean or something else, so they don't both look like they were just put there?
That's a good question, and as a owner builder, which is what John is for Lot 2, they've chosen to go with a farmhouse style. So the farmhouse style is more of a batten board style on the bottom with horizontal siding on top. It's got black windows, white exterior, so it's going to be a lot different than what you see. That's more of the modern farmhouse look, but still preserving with the architecture that's known here in the small town. A typical Craftsman is usually horizontal siding, and what we've done to kind of spice this up, and it does cost a little bit more, is shingle siding. So shingle siding, which will be painted on the house on the left. So they're not exactly the same, and I think they both blend together in that area.
Mr. Leonardis?
One more follow-up question. Will there be enough color differentiation? For instance, on the homes on Shannon Road, one is beige and one is tan, right? So how would you differentiate them so they do not look too identical color-wise?
Well, we're definitely not going to do a white house on Lot 1. So Lot 2 is definitely the modern farmhouse look, or not modern, but it's a contemporary look with white finishes. The house on the left will be a darker gray.
Thank you.
Further questions, Mr. Rennie?
Thank you, Mayor Spector. So I did my homework and I drove out to the site twice. I drove out once and I thought about it and I went back. And I'll tell you my concerns so you can maybe work on it some more if you can. You know, I drove up and down the street and I stopped at the bridge. The other side of the bridge, I think, is sort of another neighborhood. And I realized there's a court behind that had lots of big houses. But when I'm on Bella Vista, I don't even feel that court as part of the neighborhood. And you mentioned the house at 400, which I tend to agree. It seemed large, but it's on the corner. But it did have, you know, a bunch of different roof lines to kind of hide the mass. And I'd read the report beforehand that there's some other houses that are close to the same size, but I couldn't find them. In other words, they're hidden. You know, the mass of them are either hidden from trees. You said there's one across the street that's as large. It must be halfway down the hill. So my concern is when I look at the story poles that are up, this looks bigger and it looks like it's going to stick out more than any other house on the street, even if they are close to that size, because the ones that are bigger are hidden somehow behind trees. I assume part of the question would be the story poles are before you've changed them and moved it back, and maybe moving back would make a difference, but I'm having a hard time seeing how that's going to make them look less big to the street and out of place with the others. I assume the oak on the left side is going to stay. There's a fairly large red tree on the right that I think was probably going to go. Is there any chance that it's going to stay now that you moved that lot back? Any of these kinds of things I think will help to hide the houses. Your drawing doesn't show any trees, so it just looks like this big house. I'll let you see if you can tell me anything new from what you've already said.
Well, that's a lot of information, but there are so the reason why we have the two-story houses and the reason why they're big is it's anything that's been done since 1980, addition-wise or new construction. 3 doors down to the south, new construction additions are all 2 stories in the neighborhood. Obviously, the reason why we extend our neighborhood out further than most that you look at is because we have no neighbors across the street. So that's why town allows us to go 1 more door down and so forth. We do have 2-story homes down the street from us. Across the street is considered a 2-story home, and they're at 3,016 square feet. The story pools are reflective of the original Planning Commission hearing and not reflective of setting back an additional 10 feet. Setting back Lot 1 an additional 10 feet not only provides our neighbor with less shadow as well as a view, it also helps preserve the oak tree in the front yard, which we're definitely an advocate of. The redwood tree in the back of Lot 2 is slated to go, it's a very large specimen. I don't believe it's a heritage tree in Los Gatos, and the future owner would like it gone so they can do their landscape plans.
There was a tree that was red in the front. Is that one going to, on the lot that's to the right? Is that one going to go?
I believe those are all going to go in the front, yes.
Is there any planting plan, if I keep asking, if there's any planting plan to hide the fronts of the houses over time?
The landscape plan should have planting. Obviously, the large oak on Lot 1 will hide the majority of that house. Actually, you can see the front balcony on Lot 2 on the second story is fairly close. And if you look at those story poles and you're directly walking down the street, you have a hard time seeing that house because that oak tree is just so massive. In terms of, what was your other question? Oh, in terms of additional trees, during our landscape plan, we actually have some proposed right now. A number of trees that we have proposed per Larry Cannon's recommendation are along the northerly property line as well. Those aren't so large that they're going to hide the houses, but it will provide a buffer, which is our biggest concern right now with our neighbor to the north. We also have trees in the front yard landscape plan.
Okay, thank you.
Remind me, do these homes have cellars or basements?
Lot 1 does not have a cellar. Lot 2 does.
And what is the size of Lot 2's cellar?
Lot 2's cellar, I believe, is 1,400 feet.
1,400 square feet, right?
That's why that's the smaller house overall upstairs at 3,016 square feet, matching the existing neighbor.
All right, so then the 1,400 would be an additor to the 3,016.
Yeah.
All right, any other questions? Ms. Sayat.
Mr. Black, I'm looking at sheet A6, and I know you proposed some modifications. What were the modifications to the height, and does this schematic in A6 reflect those? I'm just looking at the neighborhood plan.
You're looking at the streetscape?
Yes.
So the only thing that you'll see in the streetscape is the height reduction went for the left house went from 28 down to 27, and the right house went from 27.5 down to 26.5. You can't perceive the move back on that illustration, obviously.
Further questions? Thank you. You'll have 5 minutes as a team to rebut at the end of our testimony. I only have one card. If anybody wishes to address us on this agenda items, please submit a speaker card. Carol Hamilton. Ms. Hamilton, you have submitted a card. You speak now.
Council and Mayor. My name is Carol Hamilton. I live at 368 Bella Vista Avenue, which abuts the property to the north. And basically, I had sent a letter in to you because I wasn't sure I was going to be here tonight. So you should have that. And I don't really have much more to say except that, I think that our area on Bella Vista is very quaint, and the property, you've gone through all of this, so I know that the property is, the two houses are so much larger than the rest of the houses as you drive by that they are going to stand out. I don't see any other way. And I also think that I lost my view to the east when they built Bluebird Lane. And nicely enough, they gave me a tree to hide the house. And then when they build these homes, I'm going to lose they say I'm not, but I think that if you start looking, you'll see that I have to look through their porch to see my view to the south. So although that may not be important to anybody else, I've lived in that house 38 years, and it's been a part of me. And so because of that, I just feel like I need to stand here and thank you for coming by and looking at the houses, and hopefully you'll make the right decision. Thank you.
Thank you. So all no questions. I do have one other card. Eleanor Leishman.
Vice Mayor and council members. I'm Eleanor Leishman. I live at 332 Bella Vista Avenue. Our house is 5 houses south of 360 Bella Vista. And I'm here tonight to speak in opposition of this project. I did send you a letter this morning. I apologize for how late that was in reaching you. But my objections are pretty simple. First, the obvious, it's just way too big for our block. These houses are going to loom over everything else. They're really in your face. And I don't believe any of these concessions are really going to make a difference. If you look at our houses, they're pretty modest and eclectic, as Mr. Leonardis said. If you look at the side elevations and the back elevations of these houses too, you really get a sense of how massive they are and how out of proportion they are with our block. It really is going to change our neighborhood character. The loss of 9 protected trees is really a shame. I wonder if these houses were smaller, could any of these trees be saved? A 24-inch box tree does take a long, long time to grow up, to become something that could offer the screening, the buffering that those trees, those mature trees currently offer the neighbors and the wildlife and just the environment. I'm very concerned about traffic issues on our street. I'm sure you are all familiar with Bella Vista. It's a quirky little street. The width of it is inconsistent from one spot to the other. There's some blind curves. There are no real sidewalks on a consistent basis. People go barreling down to the high school and back. They use our street as a way to avoid traffic on Bella Vista, on Los Gatos Boulevard. We were affected very much by the Bluebird Lane development. And like everybody else in town, we're affected by the increase in traffic overall, especially on Los Gatos Boulevard. So children use our street, they bike on our street. A lot of people use it for fun. It's a kind of a country lane in a sense, but it's deceptive because it's really quite a dangerous street. So I suggest, when I looked at the plans, there were 9 bedrooms combined. Now maybe they've reduced those, but that's a lot of people and a lot of potential traffic emptying out onto Bella Vista. So I urge you to consider upholding the Planning Commission's decision to deny this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. I see no questions. Lee Quintana.
Lee Quintana, 5 Palm Avenue. I think the two issues on this project are, one, the FAR, and two, the cellar. The FAR is a nominal number which is used as sort of a starting point, and then it should be considered within the context of the neighborhood. So just because you meet the FAR doesn't mean you've met the zoning code. That's my opinion anyway. Additionally, the cellar, the general plan says that cellars are encouraged in lieu of visible space. If you have a house that's already at the edge of what seems to be acceptable, and you have a large cellar element, it would seem to me that you need to reduce the size of that house to make it less visible, so that the cellar is actually functioning in view of visible space. Those are my only two comments.
Thank you. Deborah Chin. And that's the last card I have for public testimony.
Good evening. How are you? I'm Deborah Chin, and I live at 154 Maggie Court. And I just would like to make an observation in general in terms of trends. In Los Gatos, it seems like there are fewer and fewer places to really enjoy open space. And what we talk about in terms of modern trends, 2 stories, bigger houses, it's actually going the other way if you look at the nationwide trends in terms of people building houses out of cargo lots, people going to smaller homes. And I think that, we should consider a lot of the themes that keep coming up before you. The loss of the trees. In this case, 9 protected trees would be removed. Mass and scale that changes the characteristics of our neighborhood and our town overall when you look at projects back to back coming before you. Shading on neighbors, blocking of scenic vistas, not being in character with the town that we came to know and love here. So I urge you to think about the precedents this is setting as these projects continue to come before you. Thank you.
Thank you. No questions and no further cards from the public. So the appellant has 5 minutes collectively.
Well, there's a lot of issues that were brought up. One is traffic. What I think a lot of people don't realize is that there are 3 rental units on the property right now. There's 1 main house and 2 additional rentals. What we've had there in the past is, in the house, we've had 2 adults with 2 children. In the other 2 units, we've had 2 adults in both. That's 6 adults and 2 children, which obviously increase. That means six adult drivers compared to 4 in a typical single-family house. The project definitely, in our opinion, is better off for the issue of traffic. In terms of the cellar, these are fully submerged, and looking at the houses from the front, from the side, anywhere, you're not going to be able to know that there's a cellar there. There's a light well that's off to the side behind a closed fence. Nobody would ever know that there's one, and nobody could ever really think that that's in lieu of any square footage that they're getting in the first and second floor. The other item is the beauty of this project and the beauty of this lot is not the lot itself, it's the view. And the view is not of these homes, the view is of the south, it's of the west, and when we have people walking by, and when I'm on that property looking around at people, they don't look at these houses. As much as I want to say we're going to keep moving these houses back to make it better and better, everybody looks to the east and to the south because that's where your views are. That's why we have these houses. That's why we have master balcony in the front, because it's gorgeous over there. The scenery does not change. It is not, these houses do not block any views. And we really feel like we've done a good job with our concessions. That's about it. Do we have any more questions?
Thank you. Questions? Mr. Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. Mr. Black, the current properties or structures that are there, what is the setback on those? They seem like they're pretty far back from the street compared to the setback of where the new houses will be.
The current setback is around 40 feet. Our neighbor to the north and neighbors to the south are both at 25 feet.
And then the new structures will be placed back at what setback?
Lot 2 will be at 31 feet, and Lot 1 will be at 36 feet.
So we're only losing 9 feet of setback on one home and 4 feet on the other, is that?
It's actually increased by 11 feet. We were at 26, and we're going to 36, and the other one is adding 5 feet.
Yes, but in comparison to the old structures?
Oh, to the old structures, yes, you are correct.
Thank you.
Further questions? Mr. Rennie?
Just want to confirm, so the changes on the sheet we got are changes since the Planning Commission reviewed this?
Yes, they are. So we had our eyes and ears open. We understood that there was issues with size and massing. That's why we came up with these revisions that we feel adequately are, solve the issues.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Seeing none, thank you. I will close the public testimony portion of this hearing and look to the council for questions, comments, motion. Mr. Leonardis. Oh, and it's fraternal twins.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. I know it's getting late and the conversation has to start somewhere. And this, again, reminds me of the case that we handled over on Shannon in some sense. And I particularly remember the chart that showed houses that were being proposed that were on the larger end of the square footage range within that neighborhood. Now, in the Shannon example, there were several homes within 1 or 2 homes away that were similar square footages. In this case, these do appear to be quite a bit larger, although there is the one home that is the 3,000 square foot. With that said, they are on larger lots. But I think about what Ms. Quintana said, yes, you have floor area ratio. Does floor area ratio mean that the highest and best use throughout Los Gatos someday will every house will be squeezed to its maximum floor area ratio with a full basement many years from now? Or is it a suggestion, one suggestion to be considered among many suggestions with good design? And that's all I have to say to start out.
Further discussion? Ms. Vice Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, so these are never easy, and I understand that with regards to this, that you're building to a specific family unit, and so my only concern, and I understand the Planning Commission had several, but I tend to always default on the rhythm and scale of the street, and when I look at Bella Vista, and I know there's 2 ways to come, and if most of the time when I came to do the site visits, I came via Caldwell. And I am concerned that these houses do stand out. And I understand that the story poles don't reflect the changes that are made. But looking at A6, looking at the story poles, and just looking at the size, I am a bit concerned that these houses will stand out because of the massing. Personally, if there was a chance to look at it and see if there were some architectural changes you can make to further reduce height, to further reduce the massing, I think I'd be in support of that. But right now, I just do feel that it's a bit too large for that street. But I'm still listening to the other suggestions because that's the one area where I'm still hung up on.
Further discussion? Mr. Leonardis?
Well, and I looked at one of the diagrams of the comparable houses, diagram A6, and I saw Miss Hamilton's house, and I saw some of the other homes, again, that were surrounding it. Again, there is a larger home. What is it, 346 Bella Vista here? But 350 Bella Vista looks like a Tudor-style home. Lots of smaller cottages. So sometimes when you're early to the game in the neighborhood, you play by the rules. You look at the floor area ratios. You look at the the architectural design elements and the reviewing architect says everything's okay and those kinds of things. But most of your neighbors' homes are smaller and older than yours. So we run into this situation where you inevitably compare, as the Vice Mayor said, the rhythm of the street and how is this going to fit into the rhythm of the street. And one of the speakers mentioned what I said, is that a diversity of setbacks and home styles really makes for a great character in Los Gatos. And when I look at what I call the craftsmanization of Los Gatos, everybody wants to build a big craftsman everywhere. And for me, it's just getting really tiring looking at all those homes. With that said, I'm not here to design from the dais or be an architect or anything like that. So those are more of my random thoughts.
Sharani, you have more random thoughts?
They're pretty much random. Yeah, I think so. And I'm not sure I can say anything different than what the other council members are saying. I also having trouble seeing how these houses fit in. I see that 346 on the streetscape view looks like it's the same, but when I drove the street, I'm pretty sure that house is set way back from the street with a large tree, so it doesn't look big and out of place compared to the other houses. And that's my main concern here. If we had some large trees to kind of hide it from the street, but applicant said the oak tree is going to hide the house. I think it really only hides part of it, and only if you're straight across the street from it, not as you're coming at it. So I'm still struggling with it's not really fitting in very well. That was random enough.
Thank you. Yes. What we have to keep in mind, and I think we did it last time in the last application, even though we had difference of opinions, is we are not sitting here as a council that is evaluating the application as a new application and looking at it to see, do we like the architecture? Do we not? Do we like the trees being removed? Do we not? We are looking at a decision that has been made by the Planning Commission on the architecture and site application. And that Planning Commission has denied the ANS application because of neighborhood compatibility. And I take a different route every time I go down Bella Vista. So I go from either the high school and so I'm going, or Simons, so I'm passing it on the right. But I'm seeing the same types of diverse architecture, the smaller homes, and not necessarily small homes, but smaller homes. And I could never find, based on the facts that we have before us, that the Planning Commission erred. They looked at neighborhood compatibility, and I think that is the appropriate thing to look at in this case. And so since I have sort of a quiet council tonight, I'm going to move to adopt a resolution denying the appeal of a Planning Commission decision denying the architecture and site application S15053 and 054. Ms. Sayak.
If I just may ask, denying it versus remanding it back with the additional changes?
This is denying it, yes.
Okay.
And with regard to the additional changes, yes, there are additional changes. I find them quite minimal, and I find that they would, in my opinion, would not create neighborhood compatibility, and so I would not send this back to the Planning Commission. Mr. Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Spector. If I could ask staff of the process, if this motion gets a second and if this gets denied, where does that leave the applicant as opposed to if council were potentially to remand this back to Planning Commission with specific direction?
If the applications are denied, then the applicant would have to pursue new architecture and site applications. If it were remanded, there is a 50% remand fee of the existing applications, and then we would review those revisions based on the direction and forward those to Planning Commission at the appropriate time.
Thank you.
Let me follow up on that. If it is remanded to the Planning Commission, but not tied to the revisions that we've received since the Planning Commission. In other words, let's say it's remanded back saying we want smaller homes consistent with the neighborhood. Would that still be the 50%?
Yes.
All right, then that being said, I'm going to withdraw my motion, and I can do that because it doesn't have a second. And I'm going to move that we grant the appeal, deny the appeal, but remand this back to the Planning Commission to reconsider architecture and site application S15 053 and 054 for homes that are smaller and compatible with the neighborhood.
I'll second the motion.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Discussion. Seeing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you, staff, council. Meeting's adjourned.